Hey everybody, I'm Nico, and you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at NicoAction. That's NicoAction.
And I'm TK. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at xnateXgrayX.
And that can only mean one thing. We are here to continue our celebration of all things MC2 Universe 982, the one and only home to everybody's favorite disaster piece, Mayday Parker, Spider-Girl herself.
It's the final countdown.
It really is. This is a kind of shocking volume in a lot of ways. We are talking about what really should have been, by a lot of metrics, not my own metrics, of course, but like by a lot of reasonable metrics, should have been the death of the MC2 universe.
But it won't die.
No, it won't. It's going to hang in there. You know, you've said a number of times that by, 2003, you'd completely been unaware that MC2 even existed. And yet, what we're taking a look at today spans from October of 2005 through October of 2006.
And we're going to go into 2008, 2009. I mean, this thing just goes on. And it's really funny because I knew that obviously the original book ended at some point, but I guess we just got so deep into it at a certain point that I stopped paying attention. And when we hit issue 100, the final issue, I was just completely unprepared for it.
Absolutely. Really, it smacked me in the face. It felt like it was impossible that was the ending. That's like a huge current through my notes. But that means we're here to talk about Spider-Girl 89 through 100, which have yet to be re-released in trade or digest form, as both lines of those were discontinued well over a decade ago. We're also going to be taking a look at Last Planet Standing, which was released from July to September of 2006. Every single one of these is either written by Tom DeFalco with Ron Frenz, in the case of the Spider-Girl issues, or Ron DeFalco and Pat Olliffe in the case of Last Planet Standing, though Tom DeFalco gets credit for the Amazing Spider-Girl number 0 by himself. Now, once again, those pencilers fall pretty much on exactly those lines. Ron Frenz pencils all of Spider-Girl through 99, where he then shares issue 100 with Pat Olliffe, and then Pat Olliffe is responsible for the pencils on Last Planet Standing. Sal Buscema is the inker through issue 100, where Scott Koblish assists, who is also the inker on Last Planet Standing. Colorist Gotham Studios and Digital Rainbow's Rob Rowe for the two different series, though Dave Sharp is our consistent letterer. Same crew as always.
I mean, they're nothing if not consistent and reliable.
Well, what was not consistent and reliable was the numbers. After some real fucking Plinko numbers on Last Hero Standing and feeling like maybe there was a chance that Spider-Girl would tick up, Last Hero Standing sold between 32 and 39,000 copies an issue. Spider-Girl continued her sales drop, with issue 89 selling 18,500 copies. This precipitous drop continues through the end of her series, with a few notable exceptions. The series hits an all-time low on sales, with issue number 96 selling 16,737 copies. Ultimately, there's a bit of a rebound, but issue number 100 only sells 22,600 something copies. Now, okay, that could all be all right if Last Planet Standing was the same hit Last Hero Standing was. But Last Planet Standing's first issue comes in under Last Hero Standing's last issue, meaning the best-selling issue of Last Planet Standing sold less than the worst-selling issue of Last Hero Standing.
It gives you this impression that everybody who loved this universe was kind of done once Last Hero Standing happened. Like, that might have been the place to be like, and they all lived happily ever after.
It's a pretty good jumping off point, all things considered, and the numbers really kind of meter that back. Last Planet Standing debuts at 32,200 copies and ends at a near Spider-Girl levels, 23,483 copies.
It just shocks me because I actually really loved Last Planet Standing.
I love it!
I thought it was so good.
It's like the shining moment of the MC2 universe. Like, seriously.
The whole time I was like, oh, what a great thing for people. Like, people must have loved this. I did not know these numbers.
And, I just want to point out that we're used to Spider-Girl using big event numbers to kind of rebound some sales. And while Amazing Spider-Girl number 1 does see some very strong sales of nearly 48,000 units, Amazing Spider-Girl number 2 and Amazing Spider-Girl number 0 both sold roughly 28,000. So the lead up didn't do do anything, and then it immediately falls off. I would point out that Amazing Spider-Girl keeps up its numbers a little bit higher than Spider-Girl will, but for barely a year. And we really are looking at a sad, I said it last episode, but it's really not that Spider-Girl won't die. It's that they just won't do it quickly.
Yeah, and you start to really understand what that looks like when you make the jump from the original Spider-Girl series into Amazing Spider-Girl, which obviously we'll get into. But it's one of those things where I was so deep into it this whole time that, even though like on a certain level, you're like, this whole thing is absurd. I don't understand how it made it 100 issues. Once you're really in it, you don't get the degree to which like this really is already over and could have been wrapped up nicely a while ago.
That is the worst feeling, that it's just stay of execution after stay of execution. And you just sort of hope at some point that they're going to just start closing out storylines. Because it's not that I don't continue loving it. Like, I genuinely think some really great stuff has been in the back half. I'll admit, 89 to 100 doesn't have any fuck me, that's so good issues like we felt with the J2 issue, like we felt about elements of the Spider-Girl Spider-Man team up issue, like we felt about places where they did really lovely touchstones. This one it feels like after the success of Last Hero Standing, they said, well, just get to 100, we'll renumber, just whatever it takes, get to 100.
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. Like for Spider-Girl and the fact that by this point we really, as I keep saying, ought to be into longer arcs, the fact that most of these are just single random throwaway story issues, they're actually all written really well. It just feels bad that they're the last 11.
I agree completely. And I want to talk for a minute about things that suffered for format compared to other iterations. One of the things that made Spider-Girl's transition into Last Hero Standing so effective was that it was a weekly event, and you really only had to buy one issue of Spider-Girl at the same time as Last Hero Standing. And even then, you got that 88 came before Last Hero Standing, and 89 makes it clear from the first page that it takes place immediately following it. But if you were to buy Last Planet Standing dropped 2 issues in July alongside Spider-Girl 98. It then dropped 2 issues in August alongside Spider-Girl 99. And then nearly double-sized Spider-Girl 100 dropped in September alongside Last Planet Standing. Then Amazing Spider-Girl number 0 came out in October before the Amazing Spider-Girl number 1 launched in December. It really feels like one of the things that we heralded, a funny phrase for this volume, about the last few volumes of Spider-Girl was their coherence and their clear narrative direction and publishing schedule. And it feels like they just threw that whole fucking thing out for this.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. There's nothing that really lets you celebrate this end of an era or this transitionary period.
And it feels as though, in some ways, the creative team felt similarly, because issue 89 has some really uncelebratory introduction for post-major crossover Mayday Parker. I just wasn't expecting us to come back from Captain America's dead, Thor is back, Hulk is torturing Loki for the rest of eternity, heroes turned on each other, there was rioting in the streets. It just feels like we come back with basically the equivalent of, honey, where's my super suit?
Yeah, and right back into high school drama. Great, she's back with Davida, but her experience in Last Hero Standing is relegated to like a vague reference that only she knows what she's talking about because, again, her friends still don't know that she's Spider-Girl. Just odd choice.
And, I'll admit I don't know enough about classic Spider-Man lore. Is Mrs. Winterhalter a classic Spider character or something that I should care? Like,
yeah, genuinely no idea.
Yeah, I just don't know if I should care. And sometimes not knowing if I should care makes it very difficult to be sure why you're showing me things. Ultimately, this volume does a better job of that than previous volumes. But I do find myself a little confused why I care about Mrs. Winterhalter.
I was wondering, every time you see an old person in Spider-Girl, you have to wonder if they're somebody. So I was like, Is this Madam Web like spying on her? Is this an Aunt May clone?
I thought it might be Lady Doc Ock infiltrating her high school.
Which it would be such classic May to not look at this woman and think Lady Doc Ock.
I was thrown by the lack of extra arms.
Yeah, it really is one of those moments where I'm like, they're mentioning this lady and highlighting her too much in 2 panels for me not to think something is going on. But spoiler alert, there's nothing indicated here that's going to matter.
NBD, me and my dad got trampled by the Hulk, you know. What a weird cover story. Also, this whole it's a human stampede. I'm fascinated by what they're trying to do with some of this wash over, but also this issue could have been horrible. And it is ultimately better than I could have imagined it would have turned out.
I think it's being a little generous.
Oh, I had some nightmares about how this was going to go, so I'm still real relieved.
I mean, everybody made it out of the burning plane, but it doesn't mean it didn't crash.
That is fair. I need to bring up our absolute favorite thing in the world. I didn't notice you standing there, Megan.
Megan, here's another one. Something's going on here, and it does not get resolved by the end of Spider-Girl.
No, and that's the thing. There is no chance that issue 100 is issue 100. I really think the better thing to do is think of it as like 75 issues for the first volume, and then like this 25 plus whatever the 30 is of Spider-Girl is like 50 something, and then there's that extra like 15. So it's like, just think of it as 75 and 75 instead of like 100, 30, and 20, because there's no way this volume really closes out at this point. I don't know. I also find myself really shocked Brad is back.
Can't get rid of him.
No, like all white people, he gets an unbelievable number of second chances. This is fucking weird, man. Number one, the somewhat inconsistent art in this issue does occasionally get me. Sometimes Moose is the sort of unkind, tropey, heavy-set character we mentioned in previous episodes, and sometimes he does get that muscular look back. But it's the same thing with Mayday, where sometimes she looks like a 43-year-old lesbian and sometimes she looks like a 15-year-old.
Yep.
Okay, so Howard beat up Courtney for helping Sandra break up with him. I'm saying this all slowly and carefully because this is a story that we've dreaded building in the background forever, because once it finally happened, canon is canon once it happens, and then it's what we're stuck with. And I mean that, just really honestly, this could have been a lot worse than it turns out, but I don't know. It really struck me that this was the comeback from last hero stand.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just a timing thing, but very unfortunate that we go into this storyline. I mean, there was always going to be a reckoning with Sandra and Howard that has been obviously playing in the background. I'm not surprised that it happened. I just doing it now, and then the added element of Courtney just also was in the mix is so weird to me. I just can't imagine what anyone was thinking.
I had a whole lot of fun screaming every time I saw Chris, right? I really did. But I don't know who Caitlin Lieber is. I don't know why she looks exactly like Chris, but she does. And perhaps she's meant to either be a character. I can't help but notice how many kind of names there are, like Howard Kavanaugh. Well, Howard Mackey and Terry Kavanaugh were creators at Marvel for a while. Then this is Caitlin Lieber. Well, Stanley Lieber was Stan Lee. So like, I wonder how much of this is meant to be tributey or referencey, but there's a lot of dialogue on these pages.
There's a lot of dialogue about domestic violence that women experience as written by Tom DeFalco.
Yeah, and, there's weird things like Gus and Joyce, Courtney's parents, evidently, sure, where Gus says that it's all Joyce, Courtney's mother's fault, because she had a full-time job, and that's why Joyce, I don't even know. I am really fascinated by these parts of it and how they make a story out of what isn't a story. I don't think I needed Courtney to get injured for this to matter. And creating a context by which Courtney is a victim does nothing to improve the story. Sandra was victim enough.
Yeah, and I think it kind of feels like it's meant to give May permission to insert herself into events that don't have anything to do with her, even though that could have worked so much better as a lesson had she just found out that Sandra, who she had once was kind of obsessed over her abusive relationship a little bit had been abused once again. And like just May dealing with the fact that being a hero and wanting to help, sometimes you can't help people. And sometimes it's like not a superhero situation, it's just a life situation. Like that's a really effective lesson that doesn't put the onus on the writer, who is a man in his 50s, to talk about the experience of domestic violence that teenage girls have.
I very much agree. And if, the argument is that it needed to be Courtney so Moose would care, I think you could have just had everybody find out that Howard is a latent low-level mutant and Brad would have done it for him. Instead, they inexplicably start rehabilitating Brad throughout what we're going to read, and we will get to that for sure. But, the ultimate payoff of this issue, where May breaks the gun and Moose is going to beat the ever-loving shit out of Howard, and May stops him to break the cycle of violence. It's really effective for me that May protects Moose from becoming the thing he fears. I don't know that the issue about women going through domestic violence needed to become about the male, though.
Yeah, didn't need to be so much about Howard, and then didn't need to be so much about Moose.
It also got a little weird where it ultimately becomes a moment about Mary Jane. Not to get too real or anything, but I have been the victim of domestic violence, and so I find myself very sensitive to this issue. And a lot of the choices that were made here were made for comic book story purposes, not for telling the experiences of abuse victim purposes. I understand the need to balance those two things. It's just a shame that where the barometer could have aired a little bit on the side of emotional support, it aired just a little more on the side of storytelling.
And I think a reliance on by now, I think much more universally accepted amongst comic readers as outmoded belief that you can kind of just like watch a couple episodes of Dr. Phil or get on Wikipedia and get some little bit of information about domestic violence and then just write that into your story. And that's good. Like that'll teach people a lesson, and you should have the general facts and structure of your story to be like relatively authentic. It feels like it was just like, yeah, I'll do a little research and then that'll be good for my domestic violence story. Where I think now comic book fans kind of expect if you're going to write something like that, it will be heavily vetted. You will go off the issue and get a guest writer who has that kind of experience. Like
Roxane Gay will write an introduction to the issue.
Precisely. That's always a requirement.
Ultimately, I think issue 89 treaded on some grounds that were a little suspect, but I do feel that the team pulled out what was essentially an effective, I pray, end to that narrative.
Yeah, definitely not coming back for the last few issues of Spider-Girl, but I will be really bummed if we start reading Amazing and Sandra somehow shows up again.
Okay, but speaking about somehow showing up again, I thought issue 90 was pretty stupid as I'm reading it, and then I'm like, wow, there's something really manic about this issue, and I can't put my finger on it, but there's like a directionlessness immediately following, reshaping her world in the wake of Last Hero Standing, where this is actually a really powerful commentary on the directionlessness that we all feel after accomplishing something really big, where you're working towards something and then you do it and now like you blew your load. Now what? And like maybe this is May trying to work through those nope, it's Misery.
Yeah, this was a real roller coaster ride. I really thought it was like a clip show or something, or like just jokes, like all of these different pastiche comic styles that it's going through. I guess I just wasn't really picking up on the degree to which the book was trying to insist to me that like this is how May is experiencing her day. So I thought we were just looking at like just like essentially a clip show, and then Misery shows up.
I really thought it was a dream sequence because here's Courtney out of the hospital, and we all know that when anybody winds up in the hospital in Spider-Girl, they're there forever. And, I thought all of the Roadrunner stuff was just so fucking weird. And at the end of the day, they make it Misery, this character who is ripping off everything Rachel Gray ever did as Rachel Summers. And it's crazy that this issue came out in 2006, 2005, and they're referencing the 1999 Spider-Girl annual, and it leaves me wondering only one thing. Did they think that in the wake of Last Hero Standing, like in advance of it coming out, because it came out as a weekly event, they thought, I bet it's going to get a lot of old-time readers back. Let's put the stuff they remember back in the book.
Yeah, I was wondering about something like that too. Or also like just who did they think was still reading it that was going to be like, oh, Misery's back.
It's like they just wanted to remind us a lot of psychological threads that were running in the background of the title. You know, her avoidance, her need to protect herself, the fact that she feels like she's always running from place to place, real lack of sense of personal identity, but rather a utilitarian approach to life. It's not a bad issue, but it definitely feels like a very early series issue that you do late to remind readers what it used to be like.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, but then there's that fucking ending. You know, I really like where Norman ultimately winds up in this arc, but I am the first person to tell you I'm not here for your are they or aren't they evil story. I just want them to be clear with their motivations, because I don't wind up feeling like, oh, cool red herrings. I wind up feeling like you wasted my valuable Mayday pages.
Yeah. And also, like, when you write a really great story that caps something off the way that the, like, Spider Goblin War and Normie finally just relenting and letting it go, and, you know, him and May becoming friends, like, even though it has been many, many, many issues since that happened, I still feel like that's something that you do and then you set aside for, like, decades until you're off the book and, like, somebody else has completely written something different. And then the third guy comes in and is like, oh, I read Old Spider-Girl when I was a kid, and I remember when Normie was a bad guy. Let's play around with that again. But even if you do it like 5 years later, it's just kind of rehash.
Especially when you're doing it in your own run.
Right.
It feels just so masturbatory. And speaking of masturbatory, good fucking God. Issue 91. The daughter of Spider-Man, Spider-Girl, Girl Power. This is the second time we've had a ton of Spider women on the cover of an issue who ultimately don't actually team up together, because while these are all technically women, and they are all technically women in Spider costumes, I would never say this is any sort of super cool Spider women team.
Nope. No, it sure is not super cool.
The shocking secret of the Spider Shop, the minute you say the shocking secret of the Spider Shop, you just go, oh, it's got to be that the Parkers own it. Like, there's no other possible shocking secret. You just want to be like, did I guess the shocking Tom? Hey, Tom, did I guess the secret? Tom, did I get it on the first try, Tom? Because what else could the shocking secret of the Spider Shop be? Is it a spaceship? Do you have to feed it people?
I was thinking more like spaceship. I did not guess the secret, because I really was like, this is such a weird, dumb thing that there's a Spider Shop and it's like they're the Max, like they hang out there all the time. I was like, this is going to end up being like another clone owns the shop, or it's secretly Ben back from the dead. I really was far more let down than I had any right to be.
And, you know, the thing about MJ owning the Spider Shop is the thing that tipped me off to it is like the 8th line of dialogue on the page is, luckily your mother's in the fashion biz. Like, they sort of choreograph it right on the front page that she's super connected to fashion. And now, I'm going to be honest, I can name all the Mr. Fears. I, know my Daredevil villains inside and out. But it does feel, for every Mr. Fear type character I have to memorize a couple of facts about, there's like 9 goblins and 7 symbiotes.
It's a goblin heavy world.
It is goblins unite everywhere, and I'm not here for it. So when there's something about Daniel Kingsley and his brother is worse, immediately I'm like, oh, I guess his brother is going to matter. I could not have known that his brother was going to serve muscle daddy bad boy realness and ultimately be the kind of unkillable I find very annoying in my comics. But if someone had said to me that issue 91 is going to start this weird 10-issue Hobgoblin, but his brother is like, I don't know, played by the Dean from Community. I don't know. This is just really not the story I expected, but in a lot of ways, having a goblin that is not one of our, like Splenda goblins is like, sometimes you just want sugar in the raw. And like, these are like sugar goblins. And what we have are like sweet and low goblins.
I don't know if Roderick Kingsley is a sugar goblin Hobgoblin for me.
But no matter what, he's a technically classic goblin.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get
not
it. He's
directly related to an Osborn.
Yes, that is fair. There's been a lot of goblin stuff lately. The insane French arranged marriage Lady Goblin.
Elan Dejeuner.
She probably could have been my last goblin for this series. I would have been okay with that. I get that Hobgoblin has like a storied Spider-Man past. I just feel like it, even for as long and as substantial as it is, it's still kind of B-tier Spider-Man lore stuff. So for me, it was just kind of like, okay, there's another one. I can't wait to see him and Phil fight.
Okay, speaking of B-tier though, La Phantom shows up looking like a gay Jawa. It is the most ridiculous thing, showing up like a Party City Mask of the Phantasm knockoff. It's like Cloak of the Phantom X. It's terrible. And I am not here for this ridiculously lame villain. And that they're not a villain, that they're like, no, save Mary Jane at all costs. There's just some like really weird choreography to this issue. I appreciate a lot of what they're trying to do. This is a great opportunity to set up, Kingsley Shacklebolt or whatever. And they give us the gay dandiest leather daddy. This guy is like Tom of Greenland, and I have no idea what to do with him. And then Edna Mode shows up in the middle of the fucking comic.
Yeah, that was an odd choice.
It's just straight up Edna Mode. It's like not even a little disguised. She looks like she's photoshopped in.
Yep.
Literally, she's like a semi-different art style. It is so strange.
Maybe it's one of those things that like just because, I mean, it's essentially a dated joke. Like just we're reading it so far after the fact that it just like, oh, okay, haha.
Now, one of the things that I really struggled with this issue is this issue super anti-big business? Like, is it actually anti-big business? Or is this issue sort of a weird veiled statement about creators' rights? One of the things they say is all of the kids are like, oh, well, of course Spider-Girl's connected with that shop. There's no way they could use her image without her permission. She created it. Now, I create comics for a living, or I try to. I create comics. How livable it is of course, kind of the thing that this story is trying to pull into question. And one of the reasons that is such a significant discussion to have is because in trying to have that discussion, they mixed the metaphor a little too far. And ultimately, actually, Spider-Girl's family does own the Spider Shop. Just, it's more that her mother misleads her and she thinks that they don't. It's such a weird thing. Like, are you trying to say that comic book creators often don't tell their kids that they own these characters? Like, what's the driving story here?
Yeah, and then there's that whole bit where she's doing this all because there is an in-universe Spider-Man comic that made a ton of money off of Peter Parker's image, and he never got any of it, obviously, because he never revealed his secret identity.
Which, to me, doesn't really even give me a whole lot. I understand what they're trying to get at. I understand what they want me to vibe from it. But what I really get is being a superhero is a thankless job. Wah, wah, wah. I don't really get a sense of this bigger feel of community. And when the issue has a chance to give me a sense of community with all of the women putting on awesome spider costumes, it's pretty much they all just gang up on who is another woman who, I don't know, she's just so fashion obsessed. She's crazy.
Yeah, she got fashionitis.
Yeah, she's just got that fucking, she's got couturism, and there's no way to help you when you've got couturism. You just go crazy.
And that's the end of the issue.
Oh, no, it's not. I do really stand by my I don't need you to tell me that Norman's evil thing, but gosh, do I love when we set Phil up for a fall.
I was leaning two ways about it. I was like, well, this feels like a classic Tom DeFalco tries to get me, and then it turns out that, Norman's just doing more stuff to help Phil out, and he's actually a good guy. And torn between that and just feeling like it's Phil's time. We've been playing a game of cat and mouse with Phil this whole book, but he's got to die now.
Because we're approaching issue 100 and Phil has not added anything significant to the plot in so long. And there's even better goblin people. So it's like, who cares?
It would be one of those deaths where you're like, I'm actually kind of okay with this, but I do get that the characters think it's really sad.
Because in a world world where we're getting so many fills that we don't really need the fill of, I would really rather get more issues like issue number 92 and this adorable little Push story, Push being Nancy Lou. So great to see her. I just found this kind of charming.
Yeah, it was really cute. Tried to give us the old DeFalco switcheroo, but we knew that wasn't Magneto. Come on.
I just assumed it was going to be Magneta.
That was my initial guess too, but then I was like, no, because they would just show her. This is going to be something stupid and weird, and it was. You know, it's great to see Nancy Lou again. Love seeing her in an X-Men training outfit. It was a perfectly fun, perfectly like Spider-Girl issue.
Seeing Stinger really had a lot of positive effect for me. Number one, I loved seeing her be a good friend to May. You know, I would love it if it was Spider-Girl team up every month, but it can't be. And seeing her be on, you know, crutches. Okay, that's some last hero standing fallout. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is awesome, and I love to see the continuity. It's one of those things where it's like, we got to see Stinger on crutches in Spider-Girl because there's no other books and we don't have any other stories for these characters.
And it's one of the reasons that I think I hold on so tightly to the appearances in this issue, whether it's J2 or it's Coal Tiger. I feel like I wind up missing my MC2 buddies throughout these stories so much. I don't find myself like longing for Davita pages at this point. No offense to Vita. And Charlie showing up, I'm like, no, all right. But the things that work about this universe, I get excited about them and I look forward to them. And it's one of the reasons that I like these issues, even when they're a little clunky, because there's things to love that I look forward to. I need less that makes me roll my eyes in between.
I think that's exactly a perfect way of putting it. And Nancy Lou is another great example. Nancy Lou's a great character. There's very few mutant characters in Spider-Girl. You know, we barely see the X-Men at all. So seeing her back, seeing her associated with the X-Men, they have a cute little adventure. It is a lot of fun. There's a sliver of each story that you're like, this is like the Spider-Girl stuff that I love. And then there's a bunch of connective tissue that's kind of meh.
Like explain to me how to use Google, the explanation on how to cite internet sources so that you're not stealing. Whew, someone's kid just had an MLA guide open or something because that was weird.
Yep.
Most people do their research on the internet. What do you mean you use books? What? This is weird and I don't need that. Very strange. You know, but one of the things that was really cute was Nancy was just like, I'm excited to see you. How are you? Like, good to see you, friend. Like, she wasn't weird. She didn't make it miserable. Nancy is the kind of character that I would like to see more of.
Absolutely. This was another thing where superhero identities, I felt like they should both obviously know who the other one is. Like they should immediately, they're hanging out as civilians and then something happens and they both have to go put on their outfits. But like, I just felt like at this point, come on, give us somebody who knows both identities.
Or at least somebody who's not so stupid because like everybody, I just kept thinking, oh, before Moose leaves, he'll reveal he's always known.
Right.
Or Courtney will reveal that's why she's insecure about it. Or DeVito will say, don't worry, I got you, SG, wink. Like something, someone. Instead, it is a bunch of idiots.
Yeah, I worry about their college prospects.
I super worry about Norman. You know, I mean, I know what ultimately happens. But like at this point, in 92, Norman, you are treading on some dangerously like irritating Zuko territory.
Yeah, it's so ham-fisted that I'm like, there's obviously more going on here, dude. Like, it doesn't play out with the air of tension that you think it does. It's just kind of silly because I'm almost certain we have done beat for beat this exact same thing where it's like Normie keeps talking about how it's time to get the goblin back and he wants to do more goblin stuff and then he gave it all to Phil. And here he's just like, I'm making weird preparations and smirking a lot. And I'm like, I know there's more to this already.
Because what he's really doing is so, I guess, conceivable, but also sort of inconceivable. You know, it's such an over-the-top, non-stop ridiculousism that when he has the opportunity to become the Goblin again, he instead becomes a fascinating new take on Venom. You know, it's a weird kind of synergy that he's Dusk on the cover of the next issue, but we don't even get a glimpse of Dusk here. I find myself a little thrown thrown by what they want me to think of Dusk most of the time, but where the story goes, I'm happy with. But man, 93 made it tough to be happy.
Yeah, it was not a good transition into what is kind of another arc.
Yeah, kind of an arc. That is something that is definitely worth mentioning. The strong sense of arc-based narrative storytelling has definitely fallen by the very sad wayside for me.
Yeah, there are definitely some elements tying these stories together. There is a villain organization that is present throughout. This book will, from time to time in the latter half, specifically be like whatever story, part 1 of 6, and they get really tight whenever they put those numbers on. Like somehow for them, it clearly means something. And when they don't, even if it's a story, even if it's like a sprawling narrative about the crime families of this New York, when they don't number it and when they don't specifically say it is a 6-issue or a 3-issue arc, they go completely off the rails. Whatever connected story there is issue to issue feels disjointed because they just never fully tie it together.
And I think some of it has to do with the inconsistent characterization issue to issue. I feel like we would constantly be questioning why a character that just did this thing last issue is now doing this thing this issue. And without those numbers, the characters almost become directionless.
I think that's a very important part of the puzzle.
Because I love the introduction of issue 93. I really do. I love seeing J2 humongous like that and Stinger still recovering. Mainframe coming too hard is really helpful because the only person that came harder than Stinger was Mainframe. So having Mainframe be the asshole here really frees up Stinger to be the softer one. And she still gives it to May. But this idea that the Avengers are in such shambles after Last Hero Standing that they can't discipline May is somehow amazing and ridiculous.
Yeah, if we can only have Avengers stuff in May's book, this is a really good story to make it justifiable that Spider-Girl would be involved, but still let us see some of the inner workings over there that we're missing out on.
You know, speaking of inner workings, we see the Agent Whedon team again, who they still really need a fucking name.
Yep.
Big Man is just about the hottest drawn size changer ever. Yeah, he is. So big and hot. Just want to fucking knock him down. So hot. So I like that Whedon is like, I'm going to give you a chance to be a good guy, Raptor. You don't have to be a bad guy because you've been a bad guy. You can turn state's evidence on Normie if you want. And Kane is like, I roll. The nature of this relationship remains pretty unclear. I don't know if Kane works with Whedon because he thinks Whedon is ultimately a good guy or because he knows that if he kills his parole officer, he's going to get stuck with a real rough bunkie.
It does definitely feel more like that latter one. It also just feels like they made this huge deal out of the fact that they were putting a team together, but then Whedon has like no ability to deploy them as a team. They just like show up to things in chaos and cause more trouble than they're worth.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. When the Warriors show up, I feel like the day is going to be saved. When Whedon's team shows up, I'm pretty sure we're all in for. Beyond that, this issue also takes a lot of time to create a moral dilemma that I don't think it really pays off. And I'm the king of let me do that work for you, Tom DeFalco. I can't do it here. The lying and secrets thing playing out across so many stories doesn't actually go anywhere that our characters can grow from. So this whole, well, I lie to some people sometimes, so are all lies okay? When it's not like DeVita is accused of committing a crime in that time later on, you know what I mean? Like, it's just such a throwaway page that does not teach the moral imperative you're hoping it does.
I am at a loss for why we even try with this stuff anymore.
Well, because it can't all be the Scryers.
It could be.
When we saw the Scryers again, it was the first time in a really long time I said to myself, yeah, I wish every title just got rid of whatever they were, and it was just always MC2 presents Spider-Girl and Friends, and the arcs got names featuring blah, 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 because the Dark Devil stuff winds up ultimately being so important to everything Spider-Girl.
Yep, I've just had no plans to ever see the Scryers again, and it was kind of a pleasant surprise because, I don't know, I mean, we got them, you know, they haven't intersected with Spider-Girl, we might as well play around with it, but man, it felt like a deep MC2 cut.
And it felt like that's the reason we're still doing this. It was a payoff. It was something that I felt like I read that miniseries. I didn't just read Spider-Girl, I read that miniseries, so now I count too.
Yep.
Also, Phil's fine now. He's got superpowers, and it sucks.
And we still don't care.
Well, and as it says in my notes, now Norman is a Venom guy.
With a weird horse face?
With like Beta Ray Bill face.
Yeah.
And like, so, you know, one of the most famous things in comics is they either draw men with no bulge or like man pouch. And inexplicably, Dusk, as Norman as Venom is known's man pouch, sort of peeks from all angles, like he's always just erect forward at various sizes. And it's very sexual. Like, Dusk is a very Cronenbergianly sexual symbiote.
Yeah, and he's sometimes like ass out too. They're just drawing all the spider asses like this.
I hate this fucking Christie chick. She's an asshole.
Yeah, there's no point.
And she definitely doesn't pay off by the end of 100. And
Nope.
it's clearly still going in the background, but like she shows up looking like some sort of weird Pippi Longstockings fucked Pepper Ann goddamn recess motherfucking nightmare. And she's just like, I live with you now. Bring me cake. What is happening?
There was some Kimmy Gibbler in there too, I don't think can be denied. Is she Mary Jane's cousin?
And do we know her?
I'm not deep enough in my Spider-Man lore to know if it is significant that there's this random cousin that just shows up in tights with like a potato skirt on over it.
She looks like Blossom is having an acid trip, and I'm not here for it.
It just feels like she's also a goblin person, and Normie knew that, and that's why he hired her to like eventually force her to reveal her goblinness. Like everything about her is giving me goblin vibes.
Well, because right now the goblins we have are acting all sorts of like a weird horse face. And also, does it look in this issue in particular like Phil is colored for a different issue?
It looks like he was put together out of like a paper kit that you would get at a toy store so that you could make various dolls of Phil Urich. And
Yes.
Somebody made a Hobgoblin one and then they just slapped it onto the issue and photocopy. It's kind of like Edna Mode in the last issue.
Yes, exactly. And then we get to what is perhaps one of the most overwhelmingly manic sequences of maybe even the series. The fight between the Green Goblin, Kane, Dusk, Raptor. I have trouble even being sure what I'm looking at times.
Yeah, and there's a flashback partway through it. The general gist is just to catch us up on everything that we already knew Normie was doing that was different than it seemed like.
But also, all of the Raptor stuff is so effective for me. I love Brenda being like, now we'll never be free, because it's her dad all over.
Yeah, that resonated, and that was earned.
And there's something about the way the shadows are used in those last two panels where it's just the shadow of Norman and it's the shadow of their embrace. Like, I love this. I love this for Brenda as like a dramatic character. You know, I wish her life was better. I wish her life was easier. But, you know, if the middle 2 pages showed me anything, it really sucks to be an Avenger.
Yeah, especially this iteration.
You know, Scarlet Witch shows up looking real bored. Hawkeye looks disappointed he has to be here. I don't know what the hell version of Ant-Man's costume that is, but I love it. And man, the Rhodey stuff, when I assumed it was Rhodey, I was real proud of myself. This got fucking weird.
It got so weird. Honestly, the story's weird, whatever, we're gonna get into that. The fact that they have this man in this superhero costume and he keeps just being like my personal bodyguard and doesn't even give him a name. I get that it probably was meant to have something to do with the story, but it doesn't really. And it just seems like weird, tropey, like 40s manservant vibes.
Especially because he's sort of, in this next 2-parter, issues 94 and 95, he's sort of like a man beast at times. You know, we get this ridiculous prophecy from the Scryers that Spider-Girl has to stop being Spider-Girl because she's going to die in her red costume. And they get really attached to this. And so Spider-Girl eventually will come up with a plan where if she just wears a different costume, the prophecy can't find her, which is really stupid.
It's not a joke either. Like I thought like maybe somebody would see it and be like, "May, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," and we'd all laugh, and then the book would continue.
No, it's like a multi-issue story.
She's like, "I nailed this."
She's really convinced if I just don't wear that outfit, I can't die in it. Oh my God. So we get this 2-part story where so much of everything that's been going on with the Avengers in the background for 100-something issues really does kind of feel like it comes due. I honestly don't love the cover. I had to look at it a bunch of times for number 94 to make sure that that wasn't Spider-Man, because this old soldiers thing makes it feel like it might be. You know, these previously pages are worth their weight in gold, but right away I'm like, pass on Cousin Christie.
Hard pass.
Hard pass. Now, the Avengers stuff is pretty cool. You know, J2 being like, I can't believe I get to train against the Scarlet Witch. Yeah, that's really great. I love that. but the Scott Cassie conversation feels in so many ways like the exact same conversation they had in like A Next #2 or something.
Yeah, and it's a problem throughout this book especially. And like I feel like one of the great things about little diversions like Last Hero Standing is you can have the old superheroes and the new ones in the same space in a way that doesn't feel like the new heroes absolutely cannot handle anything and the old heroes are always waiting to step back in and actually take care of what's going on. In Spider-Girl, that's a really consistent problem. Like for such a long time, it's like Peter is going to step in and deal with this because May can't actually deal with it. And we finally get to a point in Spider-Girl where that happens less, but I don't ever feel like that idea is gone from the book. And we constantly see it with other people. We see it in this arc with the Avengers. Whenever the old guard comes back, it's in this way that's like, whoever you're reading about now isn't actually a real hero. That's just some stupid kid
who's bad at their job. Right. They're not just a dumb kid. They're not just, well, anything good you did, you got lucky. It's anything good you did is because we coached you, or we took over, or we did the assist. It is never the heroes earned it on their own.
Yep. And I think like with people like J2, we got to see in his own book and in other places that's just something that's not true of him as a hero. And it's one of the reasons we love to see him so much. So when you put him in a situation like this, where he's not technically being, condescended to by Kane Marco, it just feels weird and off because it's like we know that J2 and Stinger especially have done really great stuff.
And I'm really glad you used the word condescending because that is something that I kind of wonder about with this book. The Moose stuff comes off a little patronizing. And I don't know what it is, but like we've never met Moose's dad before. He gets this hero job, a fireman, and they lost his mom. And, I don't exactly get what it is that May has over Moose in Moose's mind. I don't understand, but between Moose's dad's cancer somehow being literally May's responsibility and this weird Courtney is vaguely jealous in the background stuff, this Moose stuff never lands for me.
No, and I'm curious to know if there was more that was intended that they just didn't have time to get to before the book ended, or if they just can't help themselves but to put high school drama in at this point.
Maybe somebody close to somebody on the creative team was struggling with cancer and this was a therapeutic outlet for the story, which I totally understand, but it definitely feels like it doesn't go anywhere. Well, actually, it goes to New Jersey. But...
Yeah, exactly, as all things do. At a certain point, it stops being about Moose's struggle to accept his father's illness and mortality, but Moose going to Jersey.
And what does that even add to the plot? Like, oh, wow, Moose is now 42 minutes away. Oh, okay. Sound the alarm?
And like, I was thinking that the idea was like Courtney is jealous and that's going to go way too far or something. But then when you get to the first like point at which you might see a sign that she's become unhinged, she goes, oh no, I'm actually okay with it. And I was being an asshole for being so jealous. So everything's actually fine.
You have to wonder if there was an editorial change or what, because we spend so many panels having Courtney look off into the distance emotionally. Maybe at the end we find out that Moose did reveal to Courtney that May is Spider-Girl and that's why she totally suddenly understands. I don't know, but something that I definitely can't understand is how any member of the Avengers thinks that the Avengers don't constantly spy on people. What a naive thing.
Right? Tony Stark is the leader.
Yeah, the robot leader. I don't even know. I think obviously they're going to spy on people, especially Norman Osborn. Do you think they don't currently spy on Norman Osborn, like Norman Sr.? So when Mayday is like, your dad's dying of cancer, look, I don't really have time for this, but I don't know, go tell him to go do cancer stuff. I don't know, have a good day. What a weird amount of hodgepodge.
To then go from that into the Avengers confronting Norman Osborn and insane, crazy eyes, cousin Cheryl secretary lady. Real tonal shift, guys.
I've reached a point where I find myself really wondering about the power levels in the MC2. Not that everything is all about the Ohatmu, but I feel as though the way they confront Norman Osborn could be a major Marvel Universe event unto itself, showing up in an Osborn's office when you know he's got a symbiote and is a goblin. You're asking for World War Spider-Man, number one. Number two, we just did Hulk is unstoppable. unstoppable and could take everybody down. We just did Apox is unstoppable and could take everybody down. And now we're doing Rhodey is unstoppable and can take everybody down. We're shortly going to do Dominus is unstoppable and can take everybody down. It seems like every arc we get one person who is suddenly unfucking beatable.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, I was down for it with Hulk. I felt like that's somebody who's real unstoppable, and I can see how in the context of the Last Hero Standing arc, that was a Marvel hero that you could have turn villain in a way that scared everybody and was good. I mean, we've seen it before. But James Rhodes in a weird costume that we've never seen before, with powers we've never seen before, with, it turns out, an absolutely fucking bonkers background, is the most powerful person in the Marvel universe and everybody is terrified of him, is a weird.
And it's that he has like nanite brain poisoning and the cover isn't great in the first place, which is crazy because this is Interior, not one of Ron Friends' weaker issues in this run. He's had a few issues where it really didn't feel like he had enough time to draw everything, but there are some great pinup shots in this one. But the cover feels kind of goofy. And then we get inside and it's a really dramatic, serious issue.
Yeah, it's one of those like sins of the past issues. I still find myself really like not clear how the creative team feels about the original slate of Marvel heroes. Like, do they just generally feel that they're better and that the youth of the MC2 are a hot mess and they're just writing the hot mess? Or like, did Tony Stark do the wrong thing here, or has he never done anything wrong in his life?
And how did we get here?
Yeah.
How did we so quickly get to, well, investigate Norman Osborn, attack him hard? And like, I understand that the symbiote was protecting Norman when it fought back. And so with issue 95, it being this big battle against Jim Rhodes with the Scryer stuff going on in the background and flashbacks to Tony gonna nanite himself, but then instead Jim is like, no, you're gonna nanite me. And we get, so then the fireman stuff is still happening in the fucking background. Like this is some sort of Hallmark movie where, don't forget, the fireman has to come in and get injured at the last second. And I don't know. There is just so much happening for 2 issues where ultimately, I don't know that there's even much of a payoff. Like there's a point at which May pulls Rhodey's cape over his head and it's kind of silly. But the star of this issue is how fucking cool Dusk is.
Which is funny because nobody ever calls him that.
But it says it on the cover.
I know, but they keep being like Norman, and then he goes, don't call me that. And they go, okay, what should we call you? He goes, I don't know. I haven't thought of a name yet. That is like a 4 times repeated beat.
And I think Norman as Dusk, or Norman as Symbiote Man, or whatever he goes as, provides us something that we've never really had in Spider-Girl, which is a hero who's like, no, but I'm actually going to do it my way. Everybody else just sort of aligns with someone else, but Norman is like, I'll be on your team, but I'm still going to suck the flesh off of your bones. That's just what I do. And it really works for me that they engineered a way that Norman could be Norman and this symbiote person and fight with heroes where I don't feel compromised by what they wanted.
Yeah, and I like the idea that he's like, I really am trying to do good, but no guarantees. It's a moral alignment that we don't get a ton of in the MC2. Like, we have a lot of heroes, a lot of villains, and then a lot of people who are like, I was a villain, but as soon as things went wrong, I realized I gotta go on the straight and narrow. I'm Brenda Drago. I'm a good guy now. But Normie's like, I'm gonna do my best. I'm trying to follow the laws. I'd like to help people, but I'm also wearing a suit that likes to cannibalize people, and we're just gonna see which way the coin falls.
Speaking of crappy people who wear fabulous suits, what the fuck is a Raza? Like, is that a character I'm supposed to know with their incredibly blocky hair, which I love, and her fucking next-gen Luxana Troy off visiting on a sex planet kind of outfit? I'm here for it. But do I care?
I mean, and I'm becoming increasingly unclear, especially with the ties to Daredevil in Dark Devil, why this isn't just the Hand, because it's kind of just the Hand, except everybody is alabaster white.
And super into goblins. They're like super into goblins. They can't get enough goblins. They just want to gobble up all the goblins.
Every day they goblin.
You know what every day I'm not doing? I'm not thinking about Felicity Hardy or Thompson. I'm not really sure her last name because the book forgot about her and then just thought they could bring her up in issue 96 like it was nothing.
You know who else they forgot about?
Jay?
No, that girl Megan who's just randomly in one panel and then you never talk about it again.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
I am so so stressed by some of this because they also threw back in Jimmy Yama and Heather. Like all of these characters who haven't appeared in a million years are all of a sudden showing up again. We have Coach Flash Thompson being kind of lecherous. Brad being like, yeah, man, I got real mixed up in some bad stuff before, but I'm the blonde again. JJ doesn't appear anymore.
But I will hate him forever.
In part because Brad is only here to say goodbye to Brad. Like, Brad shows up, he's like, hey, you want to hang out with us? And she's like, no, I'm okay. How have you been, though? And he's like, yeah, I turned into a big, crazy racist for a minute, but I'm fine now. I heard you're with that old man. How's that going? He seems nice. And Mayday, who really left things off on, no, Chris sucks, is like, yeah, he's fine, but we're not meant to be together. And Brad's like, maybe we can grab coffee. And May's like, maybe, but probably not. That really feels like the end of Brad, but I don't know why they brought him back to write him out.
That's a wrap on Brad, everybody. And then he just walks off panel. I guess we're doing our victory laps with characters, but I think you guys maybe didn't realize that we have not been the least bit interested in what's going on with Brad since like issue 10. We're barely even interested in JJ anymore, but like, please give us JJ.
And like, JJ needs more finality than does Brad.
Right.
We just did that Man-Wolf arc. And like, honestly, I'm not trying to sound bad, but like, I could have just accepted that blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white Brad got radicalized into some sort of movement at this time. Post 9/11, I could have accepted that much more readily than, yeah, I got messed up in some essentially white supremacy, and now I'm back. That feels a little less how the Aryan Brotherhood lets you out.
Yeah, I felt like we had a solid end to Brad with just like him poisoning his own mind and slowly fading away from his friends' lives because, you know, you assume he's just hanging out with the purifiers all the time.
I really wanted Felicity to ultimately be like a perfect side character for May, someone she could trust, she could turn to, she could look to as a friend. And instead, she's like, if you don't help my dad be a real good basketball man, you're a bad person. And so May's like, no, I'm not. You're being crazy. So then out of nowhere, Felicity puts back on her costume and is just like, yeah, since you're too busy to be on the basketball team, I'm going to be a superhero again, you know, to help you out.
It doesn't feel like she's being facetious though. Like it feels like she's like, oh, I was being kind of a dick. You know, I think would help you so much. I will put my old costume back on and we can team up.
Which, what? Like, I would love that if it felt like it was a reasonable move for any of these characters. But it feels very much to me like they said, yeah, let's just do a quick return of Felicity. Because, you know, one of the things I love about this story is Felicity learns a really hard lesson. It is a hard lesson that is well learned and it's complicated, but this was really jarring to just bring her back for.
Yeah, in the middle of a storyline when we haven't heard anything from her in a while, when we're not going to hear anything after, the idea that she would show up again and, you know, have it be in a position where she gets in over her head again because she's just a kid, like she's no superpowers. It all makes sense. It just, where it is in this like arc about the scryers on top of that, there's nothing more to do with it. It just doesn't make a ton of sense.
But something that I did appreciate was that they tried to give me a sense of who Felicity is in this. While it wasn't necessarily what I'd hoped for, and I did feel like a lot of it kind of got consumed by the weird stuff that still hasn't paid off with Flash. Like, I'm convinced Flash Thompson has gambling debts and has inexplicably gambled way too much on high school basketball that I don't know. But this storyline keeps running in the background, and despite so much attention being placed on her father because of that, Felicity still comes through as a strong spirit, and that's not something Tom DeFalco and crew always nails.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think I leave every story with Felicity as much understanding why May is like, you can't do this, as saying, no, she totally can. Like, all you have to do is help her out. Like, she's good to go.
Because I know that essentially the difference between Felicity and Mayday is powers, but then what the fuck is Freebooter?
And what was Felicity's mother? Like, that's the great thing about it. There's the Spider-Man, Spider-Girl symmetry to it.
That symmetry really plays out in the way May is such a protective big sister to Felicity. When they defeat the Scryer and Mayday saves Felicity, the Scryer self-immolates, and upon self-immolation, Felicity is fucked up. And like, I was so happy because I was really concerned that after that big moment where I want to see this character through and I want to follow her and make sure she's okay, we see her in the next issue. So it's not one of those weird danglers that we never get back to. But man, Felicity, you really should have been the co-star of this book for the last 50 issues. And they really fucked up not making you 16 and not making you the co-star.
I tell you, the only time that all works is in this last panel of her in the Scarlet Spider outfit, where she's so much smaller than Spider-Girl, who is hugging her, and you see her as this 13-year-old girl being hugged by her big sister. And it makes me want that story as well. The age stuff with Felicity is especially weird. Like, for her to be a 13-year-old, that they're drawing like an 18-year-old who's behaving like a 16-year-old it's just really odd. But this is one moment where it all feels really sincere and sweet.
Because even like the sweetest, sincerest thing otherwise in the issue, Moose being like, who the fuck would dare say Spider-Girl did something wrong? She saved people. What a great moment. What a beautiful moment for Moose. What a lovely moment for May to get, because May doesn't get enough moments like that. May gets professionally shit on by people. So for Courtney to be with, first of all, Jimmy, go home. Go to bed, Jimmy. First of all. Secondly, Courtney is just doing her best 1980s, the Hogan family extra, wearing an oversized sweater, looking weird in her big glasses, walking out of the panel dejected, and I don't need it.
And I don't believe it.
I don't believe it. That's what it is. She's not dumb. They've been through too much as friends. That is not what's happening here. And that they think that I'm ready to simply go along with whatever their ride is a real misunderstanding of what I'm looking for from this book. We said how much we've been waiting for this book to grow up and grow out of the high school shenanigans. And I'm glad that the superheroics have really raised the bar and entered some new phases of adulthood that I'm very positive on. It's just the high school stuff's getting dumber all the time.
Which is pretty surprising when we think about how dumb it had gotten about halfway through.
Oh, I forgot. We're talking about dumb. So I think this is probably a great time to transition to issue 97 and talk about fucking Phil. They make him unaware of how strong he is and how powerful he is. They basically have him gleefully beating on a child. But it sure is an interesting comparison to, say, issue 7 instead of issue 97, where Phil was training Mayday, and Mayday was kind of wailing on him. And he was kind of like, hey, I don't really have superpowers anymore, so this is kicking my ass.
Yeah, I guess it's just one of those things. We're at issue 97 right now. I don't think there's anything you can do to make me care about Phil.
No, and it's been too long and too many promised threats of Phil becoming interesting and then not. Phil having powers doesn't advance his story, and it's definitely the third most interesting Goblin, right? I think Norman has some great stuff this arc. It's unfortunate that it's consumed by so much is he or isn't he evil, but everything Dusk does as a superhero, he's like fucking awesome. Like, holy shit, he's a great superhero.
He gets stuff
and
done.
Then, yeah, and like he's willing to push his powers.
Yeah.
Then there's Hobgoblin, and I'm telling you, the body they put on Roderick, I could deal with some ridiculous shenanigans to get that hot ass body. They've really reserved hot for the female villains as a rule. A lot of the male villains have been silly so that they can't be super sexual. You know, Funny Face and Crazy Eights are so exaggeratedly gesterly, so they're not rapey. And so for that reason, the female villains have been a bit more sexual, because at this time they wouldn't assume that women were sexually going to villainize younger women. It was a weird double standard in fiction. So, you know, he's really one of the first masculinely powerful villains. Once Mr. Nobody became the main villain, he got skinny and small. You know, this is one of the first hot villains. And then there's Phil.
You're forgetting the most important one.
Who?
He's about to show up, man. Come on.
He's not a villain.
He is a villain.
He is the love of my life.
Yeah.
He is not a villain. He is so beautiful. Black Tarantula is a good guy here. I love him so much in this book. I don't even love real Black Tarantula this much. That he is basically fucking Pepe Le Pew over Mayday Parker is everything to me. It is hysterical. I love it.
We'll get to that soon.
All the roids in the world, and he cannot stop thinking about growing his heart for this girl. I love it. But okay, one of the other things worth mentioning is Norman being like, I just want to remind you guys that my last name is Osborn. Here's my terms and conditions. What big goblin energy. I am so impressed that he was like, Raptor gets a clean sheet. Move the fuck on. Dude, I love this Norman. I would read this Norman. If MC2 focused on Dusk, the Venom symbiote goblin Norman, I would read the hell out of this book.
What I would love to see is a present day book with Norman as somebody slightly older, kind of cast in a similar position as Norman Osborn was after Secret Invasion, but crushing it.
Yeah, absolutely crushing it. Speaking of crushing it, actually, I don't know, Felicity, if this is the last we see you, I love your goodbye. She's a scared child and she's trying to protect somebody that she cares about. I don't know. Felicity, you are the biggest waste this book ever gave us. You were such a phenomenal character and you had so much promise and man, I don't love spider characters like this, but she had so much promise and they just wasted it, man. It's such a bummer. And I just really love that she clearly loves May the way May loves her. Makes me happy.
I just hope whatever disease she has that causes her to look 7 to 10 years older than she actually is not life-threatening.
She actually has Locklearism, where she cannot help but look like a young Heather Locklear at all times. When she's 70, it's going to pay off.
Hoping she makes it that far.
All right, so I'm just going to put it on the table. Uncle Billy, you get over here. You get over here, you beautiful gray-haired man. We're going to kiss. We're going to kiss all night. We're going to do other stuff. I'm going to take off that track jacket. It's going to be so hot. We'll eat dinner early. We'll have some sort of diabetic thoughtful cake that you can have. Dude's so hot. Dude is like straight New York men hot. Dude is like guys over 40 hot. Real hot. Uncle Billy's real hot.
That covers everything, folks.
Have a great day, guys. MC2 Universe. No, but this introduces a really strange storyline. I had friends that this kind of thing happened to. There wasn't this big debate. There was, the fuck, you could put food on the table for 3 kids. You're coming with us before the state takes you. There was no debate about it.
Yeah, Moose struggling with possibly losing his father, maybe a storyline I would accept. That storyline just slowly devolving into, how do I make the choice that isn't actually a choice because I'm a minor and I just have to go with a guardian? And then my girlfriend's upset about it, but kind of at me, but also kind of at her best friend, but also kind of neither at both of us, and her best friend is Spider. I don't have time for this. We've only got 4 issues left.
Well, we do not have time for boys, is what we do not have time for. We get in one page what you and I have been begging for 175 fucking issues of Universe. Chris is like, nah, I'm gonna hit on this other girl. I've moved on because you haven't paid me attention in 10 issues. So why would I keep pining after you when you've made it clear you're not interested? Jimmy does not belong on this page. Like, as somebody who gets off on attention, yeah, I like it when guys are like, oh, you're pretty. And it's a thing. But like, I'm not gonna be like, well, and this internet thought doesn't message me anymore. Like, damn girl, get somebody you never paid mind out of your mind, because you have no right to have him there. That's actually kind of like popular girl abusive of you to put Jimmy in that same category. And that is, you are better than that, May Parker. That is you on a bad day, but you are better than that. Is Chris there again? Is Chris up there, 53 years old, hitting on a student at his high school? And then is he down here in his staff yearbook photo next to JJ and Brad?
Yep, that's double the Chris for less than half the enjoyment.
And he has no line of dialogue in either place.
As it should be.
So then, I don't know, some kids are playing, I'm going to assume Blitzball on Besaid. Waka and Titus are about to show up, and it's going to get very exciting when the Sin Spawn arrives. But all of a sudden, Wesley from Buffy is breaking a very muscular man out of jail. We find out he is Roderick Kingsley, the Hobgoblin. And other than, I really genuinely find this guy's character design very very sexy. He's just like a really big guy with, very cut features in a way that, we love the deformity on the art in this book, but quite frequently it's uncomfortable on a child. This is a grown fucking man. It's hot on him.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, I don't understand this Davida scene. This Davida and May scene, hear me out, reads like it comes from a different Spider-Girl 97. This comes from a totally unrelated title because nothing in their exchange actually fits the plot of what's been happening. Number one, Davida, this is actually some of the quickest together you appear in issues of this book. You would go 10 issues without appearing. It's been like 3 issues. You were just in the Spider Shoppe issue. So no, it hasn't been a long time, Missy Miss. Number 2, when have we ever, I understand she's got Benji, but when have we ever used babysitting as anything? Ever? At all? I don't understand this. You seem stressed these days. I haven't seen you in a long time, Missy Miss, but you seem stressed these days. How can I lighten your load? And then they're talking about Plan B, like this is Planned Parenthood next to a pharmacy, and I just don't understand this exchange.
It felt like a Grey's Anatomy-esque.
Yes.
Davida was dying, and this May visited her in her dreams so they could talk one last time before she dies.
It was so heavy TV drama.
I also think it's just funny that they're like, let's give them that thing that they care about a lot, which is May and Davida playing basketball. That's why readers came to this book.
Yeah, exactly. I think this book got a lot of things right, but ultimately it got female friendships for May very wrong for 100 issues. Every time we got close to a cool female friendship, God, that friendship with Raptor is so good at points, and then they blow it. And the friendship with Felicity, there's times I'm like, I ship it. I'm so into it. Oh my God, be 18 already. I want to be able to see you two women thrive in a romantic relationship together. I want to see you bring each other happiness. Yes. And they blow it. They get so close. And then is this scene with Davida meant to make us think that these two have been, I don't know, but at no point does this, okay, you know what it kind of reads like? It sort of reads like Khadijah just showed up out of nowhere, and she's here to talk about how much she loves slamming heat and living single with her best friend, Rachel from Friends. And it just doesn't work for me.
No, it doesn't. We're past the point with Davida. She has no purpose in May's life.
Because I actually think May has some amazing male friendships. Once the romance is out of a friendship, May is a fucking awesome friend.
Yep.
And I really love May as a friend to, unfortunately, mostly male and male presenting and male coded characters. Because she's also really great in her dynamic with Lady Hawk, where she is in a much more submissive role and understands how to respond to Lady Hawk such that she does not cause a situation between them. I don't know. I really always wanted May to have a strong female friendship, and it just feels really unfair that we never got it.
You're right. And on the flip side of things, there are so many characters that know Spider-Girl but don't know May that are really good friends to Spider-Girl. They're all there. There are so many great women in her life, and it's like the writers just can't figure out how to hit that little button that gives May the connection that she deserves with the women in her life.
Yeah, because, I'm over here championing Black Tarantula. I do recognize how creepy it all is. I just think he's really hot, and I want that Black Tarantula for me, for my own purposes, to have this character in fascinating constructions where he's more bound by a sense of who he wants to be than the world he's built for himself. There's things about this character I really, really like, so I root for him, but I know he's a fucking creep.
He's a little weird, but, he's 18, he's still young himself, so it's all cool.
And not cool is probably I'm going to put on the black costume so I can't die in the red costume like in that prediction. And then the Hobgoblin rides again. This is one of those things, if the Hobgoblin had shown up in issue 9 and then showed up again, it would feel earned. But otherwise, Tom DeFalco and co. are banking on us having a relationship with this subject matter, Hobgoblin, as performed by Roderick Kingsley, to do all of the work for for him. And I don't have that, so I don't care.
Yeah, that's a big ask of the, like, what is it at this point? Like 18,000 people reading this book, that they would have this kind of hobgoblin lore, that this would be special.
And I really like that you point out that it's sort of like, oh, why is this one special? That's kind of my problem with the beginning of 98, which sort of sets up this faux problem between May and Peter, but that doesn't really exist in any real way. Where he's like, what do you mean you lied to me? And she's like, well, I lied a little bit, sorry. And he's like, I thought the Venom symbiote was dead. And she's like, well, you're going to be really grateful for the Hail Mary that comes up in a couple of minutes. But then lying about the Scryer prophecy again, I don't know. This all just feels very manufactured for the last second.
Yeah, this is not the relationship they have. Like, Peter is not her watcher. Peter does not approve missions. Peter is not often aware of what's going on in Spider-Girl's world. And the book is probably better for that, but who knows? That's an interesting dynamic. They could have had that, like Peter as his daughter's guy in the chair that is also her trainer. Like, that was a thing that seemed like a possibility early on and never showed up. If they'd wanted to do that, we could have gotten to a point where some of the interesting tension could have been May wants to not tell her dad everything like all teenagers do. Spider-Girl has to tell her handler everything because that's the only way they all get out of this alive. And May is torn between those two things. That's what they're trying to give us here, but that's not established. That's nothing. Like, that's just Peter randomly being like, I didn't know about this. I mean, May should be like, you don't know about half the things that go on as I'm Spider-Girl.
I refer to it in my notes as identity role politics, where they really get to play roles they want to play by reestablishing the context of their identities to one another over and over again. And it gets really tiring because I read Spider-Man, for instance, because that's a superpowered kid who hides that he's superpowered from his aunt who raises him. I was reading Spider-Girl based on the possibility of Spider-Man, her dad, being the coolest superhero dad ever, giving me something that I can't get from a book where the parent doesn't know about the superheroics. Grounding Spider-Girl is something I can get from any book where the kid is a superhero. I just really wanted something special from this.
Yep.
The Scryers and the Hobgoblin stuff, like I said, it's just so much stuff that's been running in the background of these few issues. Like, if the whole series was based on this episode, sure. That's not what this feels like. This feels very unearned. So I find myself struggling with why the Scryers and Raza and the symbiote, which we saw once before it became Norman's, why all of this matters when none of it mattered for so long.
Yeah, and why it all needs to be tied together this tightly.
This last second. That's what's got me. There's no breathing space. Everything is right on top of itself, and the places that they decide to be liberal with page economy gets strange.
Yeah, it's a lot of this high school stuff that we're starting to repeat goodbye beats.
And it's because they're trying to find room for so much stuff that it's Kane versus Norman as Dusk, which doesn't feel to me like what? Since when does Kane care about Norman?
Yeah, especially because Kane has ostensibly been watching him this whole time, establish pretty clearly what's going on. Like, he's not a perfect moral alignment person, but he's on the side of good. Like, there's no reason for this fight where he's like, I know the true you.
I agree. It's so strange. And when we wind up back in the high school, the Scryers want you dead. Why? They're a vicious international crime cartel and you're a friendly neighborhood web slinger. Heck, you've never even been to New Jersey. You've been to alternate realities, my friend. Get it together. Don't underplay your... Why is this high school filled with so many 50-year-olds? That woman is clearly jazzercising. Like, she's trapped in a portal where she can't get out of jazzercising. And then there's some sort of 75-year-old woman who's had way too much work done hiding behind May. And why does May look like she just took her first Quaalude? What is happening on this page?
It's a Ron Friends moment.
And I even love the jingle you made for it. It's a Ron Friends moment. Because it really is. And I find the I'm just the girlfriend stuff from Courtney just so beneath her, because I genuinely think that, I don't know how, but the friendship I care the most about is May and Moose, because Moose doesn't want anything from her. Like, I run these shows, so there's people in my life that need me to run these shows. I am also, in my job, I have some administrative capacities. There are people who need me for that. So when people who there's just no reason they could possibly need me. They just want me. It really means something. It makes me feel really good. It's a nice feeling, and it's something that you look for, a sense of they don't want anything from you but your love. And that's genuinely how I feel Moose feels about May. That's his best friend. And I feel like over time, she became his. And I'm going to miss him. He's so stupid. And I don't know why I care about him, but like, I'm really going to miss Moose. Enjoy Jersey, idiot.
I think you're right, and they have bought it over these issues. As much as I haven't wanted all the high school stuff, Moose has been one of the characters we've seen need to grow the most, who has then grown the most, who we've seen consistently. And this idea that he just thinks May is a world smart person, like just somebody who will have some perspective on the question of like, what should I do? Like, how do I take care of my family? What do I do next? That she would be the friend that he is like, May is great. She'll have an idea. I want to go talk to her. It's really sweet and it's plausible and it's what friendship is. What's so silly about this is that there's so not a romantic vibe to what's going on here. There's no question to the reader that May is just Moose's friend, that he really needs to talk to his friend because he's having a hard time in his life. And the fact that we can't just let it be that as we end these issues and maybe just have like a quiet reflection on like, we were kind of in the same friend group when this all started, but we weren't super close. And now you're my closest friend. Like, that's a sweet fucking story and a nice goodbye.
Because it's the sort of thing we don't really get from narrative fiction about coming of age. Everybody's always so busy realizing types of feelings that they aren't used to, that platonic friendships don't really get the sort of celebration they deserve. And it just feels unbecoming of one of the classiest friendships that the Spider-Girl creative team was able to muster up, to have it end with such a dramatic flair. But at least it ends positively ultimately.
Yeah.
You know what doesn't end positively ultimately? Okay, let's talk about the way homosexuals feel about stringing people up on fences.
Yeah.
I don't love this. Number one, it actually looks like the Buzz is about to do a complex muscle up. Number two, it looks like one of, I don't know about you, but I had to look at that one panel of the second Lady Hawk like 65 times because I just kept thinking, there's no one in that suit. There's no one in that suit. It's empty. Do they have her somewhere? Maybe she's behind Duck.
Just a really bad shading choice on that one.
But goddamn, I really do hate the moment because I do, but it's real good, real effective, very well done and uncomfortable. It's, I don't have to like every piece of art to think they did a great fucking job.
Yeah, I mean, it might not be how I wish at this time they had chosen to depict Hobgoblin triumphing over some of May's allies, but it's not, horrifyingly offensive or anything. It's just like, yeah, it's a tough image, but the tension between Spider-Girl and Normie as they try and figure out what's going on, coming smack dab into this group of other heroes that they care about, who has just been completely laid low by the villain they're kind of chasing. It comes together in a way that it's a good piece of this arc. Like, again, I wish this were a tighter arc so that moments like this were really allowed to enhance a overall great story.
You know what? Tension is my word of the day for issues 98 through the beginning of 100. 100 kind of winds up petering out toward the end. Not like in a, this doesn't work for me. Just like it loses some of this tautness, but man, this swinging into the hospital thing and then the gurneys, the thing this gave me vibes of is In the Shadow of Two Gunmen, which is
that's
season
exactly
2
what I was thinking.
Oh my God, it's so taut. The president has MS. You have to know this. You're the sixth person who knows. After this, don't tell people, I don't care. It has such phenomenal tension. It is so exquisitely drawn. The writing is so tight to the panel. The look on fucking Phil's face makes me feel sick. And I'm like, oh God, I hate Phil. And he goes and ruins this moment. I'm feeling such powerful tension. I turn the page and it becomes the best use of my expectations against me. 99 might be the finest few pages Spider-Girl musters in some 40 issues.
It's not even a complaint. It's just like seeing that shot of Phil smiling creepily into his phone. I was like, we're at issue 99. This is probably one of the last times we're going to do this. And this has been a consistent image throughout this book that Phil has this insane creepy smile that I always thought was leading somewhere. And they got me one last, I saw it and I was like, oh, he's finally going to fucking snap. It's issue 99. He's never going to snap. It's just a weird thing they do with his face.
Yeah. And that's like, oh, what an effective creative team. They do it again in Last Planet Standing. That Watcher moment will go down in history for me as the best fuck you I've ever read. But like, man, this few pages is so taut, so explosive, even where it loses me. I think one of the best things that this first few pages did is the white that contrasts all the dark sequencing, so that when we get to the bright blue, the contrast is a little too much for me, but it's made so much more severe by all of these smiling goblin masks. The beginning of 99 is just so good. It's exquisite. It's ballet. This is like really some of the tightest storytelling this team pulls off.
And I mean, it does really continue from there. Like the beat of May bursting in to go help Phil, the fact that there's a bomb, the tension continues for a while and the pacing continues in such a way that it's a really solid story moment for the book. And then we cut in with a stupid high school.
And the stupid high school thing is another one where Moose looks like he is having the best time on HGH. It has him in a great mood. He's not having any inner ear infections. And it's just weird, but something that I find myself thrilled by. And this is such a weird thing to be thrilled by. I want to thank you, Courtney, from the bottom of my heart, because you could have made this about you and you really, really, really didn't. You felt things about you. And because we have a third person omniscient viewpoint into your life, it was all about you. But you never made Moose suffer during a hard time. And that makes you an amazing person and a beautiful girlfriend. And like, wow, Courtney, that was like the best thing you did in 99 issues. I'm really impressed.
Yes, I did feel like it was very sweet. I just... like,
I don't care at all.
Moose's goodbye is taking a really long time.
Just leave.
Just leave, dude. Just get in the car.
Okay. You know, when we get to the most, like, if you get, I don't know how Equinox works, but if you get like rewards points for every time you go, this version of Stanford Blatch over here is just, he has the free cruise to the Bahamas because this is the gayest, buffest man. And his even buffer brother is the one who wears the tunic. And yet he's the gay one. This is nuts. And I actually don't think he's gay. I think he's actually like a creep and stuff. But like, I don't care. I care less about the Kingsleys than I do about Courtney.
I agree with that statement. The idea of like the supervillain that is stringing people up on fences and that everyone is terrified of also has to go deal with his gay brother is the funniest fucking thing I've ever heard of in my life. And it should be a trope, like just like I have murdered half the people that I gotta go get my faggot brother. Please. Sold. It is the funniest thing, and it's great just because this storyline doesn't matter. Hobgoblin doesn't matter. I don't buy any of this. This is not important to Spider-Girl. So it's just like, if this is what we're stuck with, please throw in a gay brother for no reason that makes any sense.
Oh, I am so here for it. And you know, when we get to the sequence in the hospital where Brenda is crying as Norman is like, let's get married immediately, those tears are so significant. They look like gang tats.
That is true.
And I love the way he transforms. I love his musculature. Like, I think Norman is a character who, beginning to end, I feel really good about. Like, I'm getting kind of sentimental, you know, like I know we still have 30 more issues and then like 11 more issues and then like 4 more issues. This just never ends. But like, it's not going to be the same.
No, definitely not.
It's just not going to have the innocence.
Nope. And yeah, I mean, we've really gone on a journey with Norman. Like, Normie started out in such a ridiculous, stupid place. And you could never have convinced me in those first few issues that we would get to the Spider Goblin War stuff and I would actually find it heartwarming and kind of moving the way the whole thing was resolved, let alone that I would then love their friendship.
Yes, 1,000%. And like, there's even places further along where you couldn't have told me this moment.
Yeah.
If you said to me when he and May are almost making out every other other issue, and he and Phil are like goblin bros. If you were telling me that Norman was going to be marrying Raptor while the Venom symbiote fighting in a version of the Avengers against Rhodey, I would just be like, fuck yourself out the door, thank you. But I don't know. I maybe think that's no weirder than, so I just need to talk about all of this BTE, all of this Black Tarantula energy that he's like, by the way, did I mention that you can't poison me and I will kill everyone you've ever met to save this teenage girl? And Raza's like, oh my god, I thought this was the final issue. Okay, fine, one more time. I think he is just so funny. He's so funny. Did I mention this other power? Like, he's so fucking funny.
I love him. He's hilarious. This idea that for some reason it's him and he's over like halfway across the world dealing with the headquarters of the people that are attacking May. That's great. Like, it's funny and fun. And it's just the fact that somehow we're supposed to connect that to the action with Hobgoblin. Like, visually, it really doesn't work at all. And then just plot wise, with all the other semi-villainous, morally ambiguous stuff we have going on, that we are supposed to tie the scryers to the Hobgoblin in any kind of like, oh, this is important that Black Tarantula is having tea with this freakishly white lady, and that is somehow connected to May fighting Hobgoblin. It just is kind of a beat that isn't working, but it's too bad because the elements really are there, that this guy is fighting his own fight right beside May. It's just a stupid, sexy fight.
Yeah, I feel like the thing that this issue did that got me good then lost me in a really jarring and frustrating way was I fell for, oh man, I can't believe it, Spider-Man's going to put back on the spider suit. That's going to be awesome. And then I was kind of like, but why? Why is he doing that in issue 99? Why is he going to be in the Spider-Man suit for issue 100? What can him in the Spider-Man suit for Spider-Girl 100 do for me?
Yeah, we've done it too much. We've flirted with, is he coming back as Spider-Man? No, he's not. No, this was just this one time. No, he just had to go make an appearance, but he's not actually. Okay, now he really does want to do it. Wait, he can't do it. It's just a repeated beat so many times. And unless they have a really innovative way to put him back in the costume for a really cool reason for the 100th issue, I was okay without it. I love Spider-Man. Wish him luck in his own stuff. I'm reading Spider-Girl for May, and I thought we had established that was good enough.
And now we're looking at Spider-Girl 100, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm proud. Like, I feel like not enough people get Mayday Parker, and like, I sort of feel like then they don't deserve her. So I feel really passionately about issue 100. I think in a lot of ways, it's a bummer that the presentation of issue 100 on Marvel Unlimited is missing so many pages. Originally, when printed, issue 100 was a 100-page special, and it contained the initial 40-page story, If Death Be My Destiny. It contained a 2-page Mayday's Mailbox, which was the name of the letters column. There is a 100 cover gallery in the back matter. There's also a short Rogues gallery. It just has a headshot from a number of places throughout the series and a brief description of the character's powers. There's nothing particularly noteworthy or memorable. There's also a collection of all of the previously mentioned Spider-Girl and her amazing friends stories. No new ones included, nothing like that. But then there are 2 reprints. Endgame, which is the issue that, of course, reforms our precious Normie and ultimately makes him a good guy. It's the one where she's, on the chair, on the cover. And then, inexplicably, I don't even know how else to fucking say it, the other bonus issue in the 100-page giant that is inexplicably not collected on Marvel Unlimited is the Megan Brady issue.
Oh my god, are you kidding me?
No, it's issue 53. I'm not kidding.
Why?
I don't know, but it's amazing that the Invisible Girl is the one that's left out of the reprint. I also just need to point out that in the letters page, there's not really any letters that are like, oh wow, what a great letter. But there's a letter from a guy named John Dillon in Sedalia MO, and every time I read it, I keep reading it as John Cicada, and I get really excited that John Cicada might have been an MC2 fan, and then I realize, no, Gloria Estefan's writing partner, we're not lucky enough, no.
That's a
Big
beautiful
John Cicada
fantasy. fantasy for you. I love it.
I love it too. So, all right, this previously page is really disappointing. I love previously pages. I think they are the best. And this previously page lets me down. It only has a mention of the precognitive flash that Kane had of Mayday being murdered by one of the scryers. It then says when the Black Tarantula confronts Raza, the current Scryer Prime, on the Web Stunner's behalf, Roderick Kingsley, the original Hobgoblin, launches an attack on her friends before leading Spider-Girl and Kane into a deadly trap. And I don't know, I feel like until about page, I would say 8 or so, the tension is so great here still. And I think perhaps it's the quote from the series finale of Sex and the City, "Go get our girl." That's like literally what Miranda says to Big to tell him to go rescue Carrie from the Russian. So, okay, my white gay is showing, but I really found that jarring.
Especially because of the goofy way Spider-Man flies out the window.
Yeah, because he kind of flies out the window when that's not a thing he does. Like, it's literally the angle of it's like he's pogoing, or I can't even explain it. And then the story really does some complicated things. I don't know what that voice in the void is. I can't really make sense of who May is or isn't talking to in this other realm. And I feel as though she is perhaps facing something that we never really got from Spider-Girl. We never really got the May Parker symbiote personality. I wonder if this is in some ways a reflection of who she might have been that we kind of get a sense of for a moment, but not really. And I don't know. I wonder, what did you think of this sort of nether space?
I like your interpretation. This being yet another time where May has a moment of self-reflection and just kind of thinks that she sucks and isn't good enough. She seems to only have two modes, like it's a Spider-Girl world, or like, God, I always fuck this up. And we've had plenty of both of those. Like, we're pretty good. I thought we had a nice equilibrium. So to do this, like, oh, she's in her own head, she's in the dream space, and just have it be like, oh man, I really suck at this. I'm terrible to all my villains and I'm terrible to all my friends. Like, I didn't get anywhere with this for issue 100.
And that we get to page 15 and Spider-Girl hasn't done any fighting in a physical sense yet. Everyone else has been fighting. That was a little tough for me, but so there's that normie is like, you never gave up on me, so I won't give up on you. And we get the really beautiful swirling black vortex kind of energy. And that's what made me think this must be the symbiote. And all right, don't get me wrong. That might be the most perfect depiction of a male nude body, cum gutters, perfect nipple peck thing I've ever seen. But did you just tell me that tattoos make you dirty?
It must have cleansed me. I mean,
farewell. What? It took away your ink, dude.
The revenge tattoo and his back tattoo are pretty painful. So he's cleansed a little bit, cleansed of his really stupid young decision.
It just shouldn't have taken all of the tats, just the bad ones.
Right. Yeah, just the fact that he is flashing his 16-year-old friend is an odd choice.
To the point where somebody says, better cover up, Osborn, minors present. He's literally hanging his goblin at her. They're implying that his gliders are in the wind. And, I should have said pumpkin bombs. The best laid plans, right? So I need to point out that I love, if nothing else, that we get this great battle between Peter and May against a villain in the 100th issue. But everything about this particular battle is the only thing I think is thin about issue 100. He has a sound device, because of course he does, and the symbiote kills itself for May. Like Gurgi at the end of Black Cauldron. Gurgi has no friends. No one like Gurgi. Gurgi kills self. It is weird. And then May is like, listen, Dad, I'm going to beat you up. Give me your lunch money, Dad. And Peter's like, no, don't take me. And she's like, I won't take you, but give me your bike. And he's like, here's my web sharpshooters. Weird choice, guys.
It's a lot to process. The fact that she immediately forms like a woman to woman bond with the symbiote, and the symbiote now is referred to as she. I actually love that, but it's a lot to stuff into a bunch of panels and then immediately be like, the symbiote will now be killing itself. We've just revealed this absolutely insane thing about it. It will now be killing itself. This is over and done with. And then May, who seems like she has reached a point of like cosmic understanding, having bonded with this being, it kills itself, and then she's like, fuck you, dad, I'll kill you myself, which was very much like previous symbiote stuff that happened.
Yes. Oh my God. They just said a bunch of times, it's only angry if you're angry. And it turns out without the symbiote, May's pretty angry.
Yeah. It's just a lot of weird tonal shifts all at once. Very strange. Hard right for the symbiote, then an immediate another hard right for the symbiote, and then the car crashes with the symbiote in it, and it's on fire, and the police are not going to get there in time. It's just a lot.
Okay, but I do really, really, really need to point out that the confusion of the battle is, for me, they keep fighting the Scryers after they beat Hobgoblin, making defeating Hobgoblin like I don't know, it's like a 2-panel quick little, all right, back to the fight. It makes it, didn't you just spend 10 issues making this the guy? And did she really beat him with a couple of good punches after, I mean, she should be dead. Like, this is one of the biggest follies of Spider-Girl. They never really understood how to make her a different fighter than her dad so that her victories feel unique. You know, Jane Foster Thor uses wind and lightning in conjunction very differently than Odinson ever would. And that's something that Jason Aaron and co got right away. A visual vocabulary that indicates why this version of the hero, though she is female, is equal to the male counterpart in every way, despite this being a comic book, which says that can't ever be the case. And they make a beautiful explanation about how, number one, obviously, duh, and number two, this is how it's different and you should appreciate it. Despite May having a number of special powers, they never figured that out. So things like her beating Hobgoblin is always just kind of like she punches him, goes back to fighting, and it just takes a little bit of the excitement out of it for me. But what we get next is the greatest battle of all time.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it really is. They had to continue this fight so we could do this next sequence we're about to talk about. So even though it really doesn't make any sense and it takes all the glory out of May fighting Hobgoblin, which wasn't really that glorious to begin with, but at least she did it, she has to keep fighting so that this next thing can happen.
So Roz is like, no more fighting. Black Tarantula is like, sure, I'm gonna laser blast you to death.
From my eye beams that I, as a Black Tarantula, also have.
This guy is the greatest character of all time. I'm serious. This guy is the ultimate goat. He is bigger every time he appears. He has new powers. His collar gets taller. I swear to God, he's the best. Oh my God. Oh, they would have never had any trouble with Rhodey if this guy was around.
No, absolutely not. Or Apox, nothing.
Oh my God, he's so great. He's so fucking great.
He's absolutely caked up in one panel. Like, this is just complete and utter nonsense.
He's immediately like, and now I have her job.
Yeah. As everyone knows.
Oh, what a boss.
And then because he has won, all of the Scryers that May and co are fighting just disappear.
I mean, we don't even see a puff of smoke. They're just gone. And it's such a weird story because now that Norman doesn't have Dusk anymore, you know, there's something weirdly intimate about the way Kane hobbles off on him in his lavender bodysuit and knowing that Norman's naked under there on his way to his wedding. I don't know. It's gay. It's really
gay. Very gay.
Like, all that's left is the heterosexual subtext because all the text is gay. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think the Mary Jane, I want nothing to do with spider people shit is shit.
It's insane. From this writing team?
It's insane.
She has been the champion of spider peopling for 100 issues. And
for 5,000 issues.
She puts on this Juicy Couture fucking tracksuit and is like, we're done now.
Now I'm one of the real housewives of the MC2 and I'm letting you know no more spider kids in my my fucking house. My little baby deserves better. What has happened? Fine, I'm gonna feed your little baby to Galactus. I'm gonna feed your little baby to Loki. I'm gonna feed your little baby to Wolverine. Your little baby just got eaten. Little baby, bye, little baby, bye. This is so illogical. But you know what's delicious? The Hobgoblin in his mask with that nipple. What the fuck?
Why?
That's such nipple. I can't even handle the art choices in this issue because it's all so good. But like the lunacy of it is amazing. Like they said, we're going to make a book that's so far out there that you can't help but be part of it if you're part of it. And like, I'm part of it. I really buy into this hospital wedding. I buy into everything but maybe Daniel being like, my brother's going to bully me if I don't be his new bitch. Like, I don't know. There's stuff that does work for me. There's stuff that doesn't work for me. But like, I'm looking back at 100 issues of Spider-Girl and I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, I mean, it ended the way it began. As utter nonsense that I can't look away from.
It's a Spider-Girl world.
The Spider-Girl world.
It really is.
Slamming heat.
Yeah. But like, you know, I feel like they kept so much open-ended that there's no choice but to keep reading. And that as this was going on, so was Last Planet Standing, and Last Planet Standing, I think, came out after this. It feels like a celebration, maybe. This was, number one, I just am so happy I did this with family. I'm so happy I did this with someone that means the universe to me, and I feel like this is now a very personal universe for me. It's always been like a personal favorite, but now I'm like protective of it, and like it's so shocking that we've done 100 issues of Spider-Girl plus 0 and the half and the annual, so it's really at least 103 issues of Spider-Girl, and then it's 12 and 12 and 6 and 5 and 3 and 5. It's it's so much other stuff. We've read like 150 issues of this universe, 175 issues. And yeah, it's a Spider-Girl world. I don't know what to say. I feel like I'm going to give the book itself, looking at 100 issues, I got to give the book a B.
Yeah.
And it's somewhere between a B- and a B+. I need to give the fundamental, reasonable execution of the original plan as it was laid out versus what the book ends at 100 as. That's a C. This is not what I was told I was getting. This isn't classic stories with a retro feel that look like one thing but read like another, but it couldn't be because it was a different decade. It's 10 years later. How could it be? But I'm going to give the heart of this book, I'm going to give Mayday an A+.
Yeah, she is an incredibly flawed character, but
Sing it.
You can't help but get behind her and just want to see what's going to happen next. Like, even though a lot of times it's going to be bad or stupid or ill-advised,
so stupid.
She feels somewhat human in that, like, this is not an idealized male superhero. This is, and I think that they thought that's what they were writing, but they just veered so far off the path, and then they were just writing consistently where they had written themselves into. She's just a mess, but that makes the triumphs all the better.
Yeah, I love that never once was she like, my period, I'm caught on my bra.
Right.
Like, she was never Oh my God, that is so foreign to this Mayday. I'm glad that we stopped caring about basketball. It was a great 100 issues, man. It was a lot of fun. I'll never do it again. I will do some issues, I'll read some arcs, but I'll probably never do this whole combined read through ever again. But I'm so happy I did it.
It is a fascinating window into a very specific character that both feels conceptually and just for her time in a way really universal, but we know just from readership and general sales is not that well known or well read of a character.
I do hope that Marvel at some point does decide to throw the full line in 5 omnibus editions. That's pretty in line with what they put in a book. That would be pretty cool. I'd probably buy it, but for shelf candy, not so much carry copies. And to think we still have 5 more issues of this iteration of the MC2 to go before it relaunches as a combined universe again. And then we get a look back on like all of Spider-Girl's adventures to say goodbye to this universe with. It does feel a little bit like they dragged this out, but I would have been excited for the 3-month event.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, in a lot of ways, I guess I figured that Last Planet Standing had to be some big, momentous thing that tied into the fabric of the makeup of the MC2 universe. You know, like I assumed as I'm thinking about it, it would probably be a little more Secret Warsy, like in a traditional sense, or Contest of Championsy. And I just didn't think of Galactus till I looked at the cover of #1.
Yeah, I was assuming that we were going in a very different direction. And especially thinking about the timing with the end of the first run of Spider-Girl, I just had different assumptions about what would take place and what the mood would be, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, let me tell you, for every one of my assumptions, they were all completely wrong. And this was a fascinating way to do two things. Because #1, we had to say goodbye to the first iteration of MC2. From there, we had to set up the potentiality of an MC2 revival. Because what this is heralding is a revival of the MC2 line. We're going to get another run of Fantastic Five. We're going to get an American Dream mini. We're going to get another run of Avengers Next, this time called Avengers Next, so it's not exactly a second volume, but it really is. And this book had to do so much work on the heels of the success of Last Hero Standing to manufacture the opportunity for, I guess, reasonably speaking, thousands of new readers to onboard into the MC2 universe without the baggage of the late 90s, because this for sure feels like the MC2 in a 2006 crossover. Just no question.
That is absolutely true. It does feel like the MC2 in a 2006 crossover. I think the job that you are describing this series as needing to do, it failed at entirely, and I don't think that's a bad thing because the stuff that it did instead is fantastic. It's just, when we looked at the end of Last Hero Standing, there were a lot of definitive narrative statements made about the idea that, like, the old age of heroes is done and it is the time of the new heroes. From there wasn't really any expansion of the line to indicate that there was anything happening with the new heroes. Spider-Girl continued kind of in the same way that she always had, so there wasn't really any moment in the Spider-Girl books where she's like, man, the old guard really kind of, everybody retired and now we're all the ones doing it. Like, everybody's still around. And where this picks up, it's the same thing. All the older heroes are still around. We have the original Reed and Sue in their regular people forms back. The idea that this would be a kind of reset point, if nothing else, it really does start with the status quo that has basically always been there for MC2, which is there are all these young heroes that could be breaking out, that are trying to break out, that are stumbling and falling, and this like pantheon of old god heroes that just won't leave.
The thing that really hits me about that is I genuinely celebrated Reed and Sue opening this issue because they worked so hard to make us care that Reed and Sue were either coming back or not. They fought so much time away from Spider-Girl and A-Next and even the Fantastic Five to get us to this point. And due to the nature of the series, there wasn't any time to spend with them. So I genuinely needed this. If you're gonna go back and you're gonna say this is a line-wide crossover, because Spider-Girl plays a very minimal role in this, then you need to celebrate the heroes you told me were worth celebrating.
I definitely agree with that. And I was really happy to see them. The 5 on everybody's shirts becomes increasingly ironic as there are like a dozen of them now. It's still really enjoyable. It just feels like this kind of writerly instinct where you know that there's always a generation coming up behind you that's younger and wants to work and is ready to go. And you want to celebrate that, but at the same time, you're so worried about writing a story that says this is their time, because in a way it kind of reflects that you, the old guard writer, might not be as relevant if you are saying the original Avengers no longer really need to be there and it's time for them to retire.
Which actually highlights a fundamental flaw of the MC2 over any random issue, that there really isn't a compelling reason that this Age of Heroes was done, because it doesn't feel like we saw a slow metering in of new heroes. It doesn't seem like there was a point at which Cassie and her dad fought alongside each other and then he retired. No, it feels like there was very much a, I am now ant person, you go home. And him being like, I go home, goodbye. And her being like, goodbye, I am ant person now. And the same thing sort of just happened with American Dream, where like every time we had Cap, American Dream was nowhere to be fucking found. And every time we had American Dream, she was like, well, I'm here because Cap's not. And I'm like, no, you're here because you are a bodacious babe bodybuilder a la American Gladiators in 1994. Your name would be like Laser or like Diamond or like Lightning. You'd have some sort of, single noun name and you'd be amazing, right? So you're not just a Cap stand-in. And this universe so much relied on, it's that person, but different. And no, we should have been able to celebrate that these characters were their own people, but by hyper relying on, it's basically the same thing. There was no real changing of the guard. Even the one we got in Avengers is immediately undone at the end of 37 issues.
Yeah, it's just a very confused state of affairs that never really gives anybody the chance to thrive fully as a young person or to get any kind of closure or clear, newly established status quo within the MC2 when it comes to the older heroes.
Speaking of things that feel old and needed to be established, that Islands of Adventure joke, that hurt. So I'm not here to knock the attractions at Islands of Adventure. The Amazing Spider-Man is spectacular. That hurt. I've had fun on a number of those coasters, but really, ultimately, Islands of Adventure was not really like the immersive theme park experience that Marvel ultimately would have wanted. So seeing something like it here where, some of the decorations are cardboard cutouts just pasted on the outside of buildings. So it looks funny. It aged poorly. It's certainly not what I would imagine leaving it in the Disney era, but I don't think Disney minds too much that Marvel Islands of Adventure is still open, because that means every time somebody goes to Universal, they're paying Marvel money. So it's not so bad, I don't think. All right, let's get to him. What in the fuck is a Dominus?
Yeah, really weird choice to do a new Herald of Galactus, to have it be kind of nobody. I was wondering vaguely if it was like a brother or cousin to Annihilus.
Well, I mean, what really bums me out is I tried looking this character up and I kept getting Domina of the Neo, who I love. And so then I'm like, let me look it up as Dominus the Wave Master, and not getting anything more. So then I'm like, oh, that reminds me, there was that weird, complicated, it was this weird thing that Marvel did where like multiple miniseries collated to make one big like 8-part miniseries. And it was, a big event that, multiple stories came together. I'm like, oh, that's probably what this is. And then I looked that up and that was Dominion Factor, not Dominus the Wave Master. And that didn't help. So I really think that for all we give Tom DeFalco and Pat O'Leaf and Ron Friends a little bit of crap for over relying on the past, this is a pretty reasonable original creation. It's a new Herald of Galactus in a parallel timeline 20 years after we would have seen Galactus last. This character has a pretty reasonable design. He has the sort of dialogue you would attribute to a random Herald of Galactus, and I like that he has a pretty significant color scheme in the way that I like my heralds, sort of set to a certain hue. It sounds silly, but like, yeah, I like Silver Surfer, Golden Oldie. I like that Fire Lord has a very fiery look to him. So this guy having green with black touches is a really cool way to keep that consistent across design.
I mean, you make a fair argument. And there's nothing that I like revile about him. It just kind of felt like this would be a place to see a more recognizable character show up as the Herald.
Especially if it had been somebody that was perhaps a minor character that was getting utilized here. Somebody maybe slightly forgettable or who had been forced into a complicated deal. But rather, this is just a character that I couldn't find anything about on the internet. And it's mostly fine for me because I think that this energy, this high stakes, high speed, very powerful introduction is one of their better introductions. And then the sun explodes, and I'm like, okay, first of all, spellbound. Second of all, this is some of the best coloring this universe has ever had. And the Marvel Unlimited scans of it are really beautiful.
Yeah, it is some fantastic colors. This feels like a product. I mean, this is a product of a later time for the MC2, but this is the moment at which you kind of see how starkly things have evolved from where things started, and how that's a really good thing to enhance parts of this universe that maybe just needed a little glitz to make them shine a little bit.
You know, because if we think back on where this all began, this all started in 1998 with them purposefully trying to make it look like 1993. And that's a weird sell. So the fact that this is now this high gloss, beautiful, polished book is just a tribute to the fact that the creative team was willing to evolve. And it's really a cool thing that they were not just willing to evolve, but they thought about the bigger picture and how things were a bit different. I think the Shi'ar got a pretty big upgrade in the Morrison era, and that kept them around in 2005, 2006, Rise and Fall of the Shi'ar Empire, and stories like that. So I think seeing them here is reflective of DeFalco having an open mind to what continued to be popular outside of his purview in the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, the Shi'ar were an interesting little moment because it really is just a couple pages and then they're basically gone. But it does reflect, there was a while, like after about 2000, where it really seemed like whatever's going on in MC2, it's just the DeFalco show. It's just whatever he is interested in. And that's completely fine. Obviously, it is a separate universe. There's really no overlap with something like 616. It doesn't need to interact or reflect. But it's interesting as it continues into the 2000s and hangs on and stays somehow important and relevant, that there is this instinct to be like, oh, well, you know, this is actually part of a grander ecosystem, even if it's not interacting with the primary universe that you know. So you get these moments where out of nowhere the Shi'ar show up and it makes sense. And if you're a reader of current continuity, it makes even more sense and seems like kind of a logical thing that would happen out in space.
And it really makes this feel like an event they're hoping people will come into. I understand that you really don't think it worked, and I'm not here to fight you on that. But I do think they were hoping that maybe this would be somebody's, oh, that's what got me into MC2, or at this point, you know, the Spider-Girl universe, or whatever they're calling it. It's, I don't know. This was definitely, in a lot of ways, better than Last Hero Standing for me.
It was for me too. And the only thing I really don't think worked is kind of this establishment of a new baseline to work from. It's still really good and really cool. And, you know, the thing I kept thinking about is, for me, this is very similar to, but markedly better than Ultimatum, which is going to come a few years later.
We could do an entire episode on places that the MC2 did stories just before other places in the Marvel Universe. And I almost wonder if sometimes they were like, leave it around for product testing. Like, because it ran so many stories just before they appeared elsewhere. Though the intercontinuity of MC2 itself is one of the most special things. Seeing the Revengers show back up cracks me up. Number one, I guess we do get our answer. They do still exist, even though my precious big man is now fighting over with Kane. Great stuff. You know, we've got Red Queen, Magneto, Livewire, Ion Man, and Saberclaw. And this is right now, talking to you on air, the first time I realized that maybe Ion Man looks a little bit like Dominus the Wave Master, but I don't think I'm going to make a big dreadful mistake about it or anything.
The amusing thing is Christoph Doom Bro, Fantastic Four member, also kind of looks like Dominus.
I agree. I see it very much.
Good to see the Revengers. It's nice that it's just this little, like, somebody is trying to call to tie the Avengers into this story and make them help with a situation that is emerging. And what we get is a pretty classic superhero. They're not available right now. They're on a mission. They're in the middle of doing superhero. And what we see the superheroing is stopping the Revengers. And it just gives this vibe like they've probably done this 4 or 5 other times off page that we haven't seen. And these guys are just a pain in their ass that they have to deal with every now and then.
Especially because they're down a number of significant members. By the way, I need to point out that our precious Brandon did get a last name on the intro page. His name is Brandon Cross, freebooter. He is a weapons and martial arts expert. So I just want to say that for all of our mocking that they made his name Brandon. They did ultimately attribute him a last name, and we see him training alongside American Dream and Hawkeye. And American Dream is pretty honest about how, almost in a meta way, it's not the same as it was. The dream can't ever be the same as it was, but we can forge a new one. And I just have to wonder how many times each one of these guys, when it's these 5 people running this crazy ship to keep it away from crashing, had to do this for each other. It's not the same as it was, but I guess we're still heroes. And like, man, this labor of love, really, it affects you if you read it all at once and slave yourself to it.
Yeah, I think that is definitely one of the places in which it can affect you the most.
Well, if you give yourself over to the madness long enough, you'll find that Spider-Girl does in fact appear in this series, which makes me happy because I was not thrilled with the last 2 or 3 pages of Spider-Girl 100. It felt like it went out on a shrug, not a whimper. It wasn't like it just kind of died. It was like the entire crew said, "We know we got more coming. Calm down. Last Planet Standing is also running right now. Calm down. We're going to get Amazing Spider-Girl 0 soon. Calm down." And like, I was not calm. I wanted to celebrate 100 issues. That's monumentous. So few women in the Marvel Universe have ever achieved 100 consecutive issues of a title without a renumbering, a rename, a proper relaunch. What a significant thing, as a matter of fact, if you forgive a couple of minor hiccups. Until Captain Marvel had a successful run of it, Spider-Girl was the only female solo hero in the Marvel Universe to beat 10 years of continuous publishing as a solo hero.
And it just felt like the only thing we really did want was kind of a big celebration of how far this character had come and how long she had held on. I wasn't at that point looking for like give me a big thing, give me like the next phase of her life or some huge event that changes everything for Spider-Girl. I just wanted to have that moment where it was like, this is the spider-themed hero of this universe. Like, this is the one. And I think even though the team clearly loves this character, and I think the issue was written with love, it just didn't have that, like, at last we can breathe. There is no longer the question of, can Spider-Girl do this? Will she do this? Is she up to the task? Can she take up her father's mantle? All of those questions, I think, if we were to pick up the next series tomorrow, would still be there.
Because that's the lesson that I think it took TV a zillion years to learn. Gimmicks mean that you're going to solve the gimmick at the end of the pilot. So a series with a gimmick has to be great outside of the gimmick because the gimmick is only there for a couple of weeks. With comics, Spider-Girl is sort of at the tail end of the gimmick is everything. So you're still sort of stuck with the gimmick is everything here. So they can't really move too far past it, which is why they need to challenge their own understanding in other ways. For instance, they've been pretty clear. Is stuff getting too bad? Call in Thor. Is stuff getting too scary? Call in Thor. Is Loki being bad? Call in Thor. And then Hulk will say, you've destroyed me in this world, and torture him forever. Now you can't call in Thor. Because they can't evolve the idea of Spider-Girl because of the nature of how they feel beholden to daughter of Spider-Girl, daughter of Spider-Man, daughter of Spider-Man. They can at least play with their understanding of their own universe.
And I do think that's where this book is really successful, in just having that playful, comic booky, superhero-y relationship to this idea of a big story that affects all corners of what we know as the MC2. It doesn't really do anything to move the dial for a lot of characters, and I think trying to move that dial might have been important to making the MC2 universe successful on its own time. But, whatever. We're where we are. They probably were not at this point super interested in trying to make this like a big line-wide, let's try and publish 6 books in MC2. But if there's not going to be an intention to make this a sustainable machine that can churn out some interesting stories, I think picking one idea and having fun with it is the way to go.
Because they really do have fun with so many of the trappings of what they're doing. I want to comment that there are a number of parallels between this and Earth X in a way that I find really interesting. There's a number of parallels between this and Heroes Reborn that I find interesting. A number of parallels between sort of the idea of new universe in general. This really tests a lot of ground and still has time to fuck with its own MO. Like, I do think perhaps the takedown of Asgard Asgard takes too long, especially, in a good way because the Fantastic Four survived. Reed and Sue are okay, which would have bothered me if they weren't. We spent way too long for them to just die like that. But it's really a powerful realization that Thor, who's just come in every time there's been a problem, is on the ropes because of Galactus, who did we even say Galactus's name once before this episode?
I really do not believe.
It's like they made us forget about Galactus just by never ever bringing him up.
But it's so great because Galactus is one of very few villains, characters, threats that you don't even have to do any previous setup for most comic book readers to pick this up and go like, oh yeah.
And it has consequence because Galactus is here to eat a universe full of characters we know. So even if you're like not a big MC2 fan, if you're a Galactus fan, this is Galactus doing his thing.
And I think even if you're not an MC2 fan, the plot devices and the setup for this story give you enough stakes that this feels big. This does feel big for this universe. This doesn't feel like, well, I mean, they'll just fix it and be fine. Like this feels high stakes in MC2.
Well, because MC2 has so little uniquely magical mythos canon. We've been talking a lot about Marvel mythos at different points on this and our parallel coverages. And the number one thing I cannot get the fuck over is Galactus wants to eat the Cap Star?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Absolutely unhinged, but I absolutely love it.
It is so unreal because it's like, how didn't we see that coming? That someone would be like, nope, gotta burn it down. That's what we do. There can't be any sort of, new universe emerging. That's like a big thing in Marvel in general. Anytime a new universe emerges, somebody goes, nope, kill it, eat it, destroy it, make it ours. So this was just such a beautiful exploration of the inheritance of wealth that a universe based in the Marvel universe would likely be fair to accept. It just makes sense.
It does. And the entire motivation for Galactus, that he is tired of hungering and he wants to evolve, also makes a lot of sense. Again, it's a precursor to what we see in Ultimates a decade later. It's a really interesting and cool idea. And the fact that the Cap Star was such a beautiful tribute to the character, but I definitely did not walk away from that moment being like, I wonder what's going on with the Cap Star. I wonder what its properties are. Like what could go on there? But as soon as I realized that that's what Galactus is thinking, I'm like, of course, it's this giant shining beacon that showed up in the sky in the middle of nowhere as created by gods. Like, it makes perfect sense and is really still weird and cool.
And evidently delicious. So I didn't, this sounds so stupid, but like sometimes in a comic book, when you think about a star, like when I look at Starry Night, I'm not like, each one is a galaxy. I'm like, pretty.
Stars.
You know what I mean? So I'm just like, wow, look at those fireworks. That sure is a nice way to say, Cap, you were alive and now you're a bunch of twinkling lights. And like in my head, it's just Cap as like star fireworks. And like, oh shit, right. Lights in the sky are something. So it's sort of an exploration of where we kind of fail to apply science to our comics in a way that is a reasonable suspension of disbelief in order to enjoy these things more, but they can use playfully. It is one of the better DeFalco gotchas. I wish that like Tom DeFalco could like pop into our show and just like go gotcha every time he does get us, because like there are enough DeFalco gotchas that he deserves it.
There are. And I've become very cynical about them, and I always look at a thing and I'm like, dude, I saw that coming. But in no way I was like, that's a beautiful light show in the heavens. I really hope it inspires people. Never would I have thought that it would be this relevant, but I love that idea. It's great. And it's one of those things that as soon as I thought about it, and we can all reasonably assume that things will be more or less okay, even in issue 1 of this. But my immediate thought was that star is always a potential point of entry for future looks at MC2. And I just think that's really cool.
I agree. It's super powerful, and it's a lovely idea. And they cement its significance with what I'm going to call the creation crew. You've got Master Order, Lord Chaos, Living Tribunal, the In-Betweener, Collector, Shaper of Worlds, and the Stranger. If there's any crew to come together and say, this moment, this thing, this guy, that star, this is significant, it's this good, gracious baller crew.
Not a woman among them.
Yeah, they should all be female now. Let's just fix it. Oh, nope. We can have one guy, some non-binary folk, anybody that wants to be there. But yeah, I do agree. The elders of the Marvel Universe all being male is, and then Death is female. Fuck. So, yikes. I don't know how I felt about Thunderstrike losing his powers. I mean, it made sense and it was good, and that's what I want. I want consequences. But, we see these super gods. Thunderstrike loses his powers. We have to assume Asgard has fallen. It looks like Galactus is winning. This is a pretty dire moment for a universe that feels pretty inconsequential after issue 100 of its only series ends.
Yeah, that was, again, one of those moments. It's kind of like the Star. It's like I was not in any way thinking, what if one of the Avengers that I love most and kind of really glommed onto as a bit of an entry point character just lost his powers mid-battle? But of course, something like that has to happen. There have to be consequences. And like logistically, having attacked Asgard, that makes sense as well. It got me, and I was really shocked and worried for my boy Kevin.
Which is why I'm actually on Vision's side. No offense, but Thunderstrike, dude, you're powerless at the moment, and something horrible could happen to you. And then who would J2 cuddle at night? So like, you gotta stay home, buddy. And I'm not saying you're the new Jarvis. I'm saying train up, and you're the new freebooter. You're back out there in 6 weeks' time. But you need a hot second because you've never been an Avenger without your power, as far as we've known. So I'm with Vision. Vision is being a voice of reason. He's not being an old curmudgeon. That is not the old guard holding back the new guard. Mainframe, get it together. You're a robot.
Mainframe just constantly being frustrated by the Vision, who very clearly gives zero fucks and is just doing the calculated best that he can with what he's got, is a really funny repeated beat, because really for the most part, Mainframe has been that person for everybody else in the MC2, especially all the younger people. Always the person that is calculating and making the choice based on what makes the most sense, and just inserting somebody that cares even more about logistics and sense, who answers directly to President GW Bridge. Just a reminder, GW Bridge is the president here. It's never explained. Doesn't make any sense. Cable never shows up. GW Bridge is the president. Why is this happening? Why does Vision answer to GW Bridge? It's great. It's really funny.
Well, it's because Captain Verrazano was unavailable.
In my mind, Six-Pack is his entire cabinet.
In the gritty reimagining where they have to make things a bit more gender effective, Holland Tunnel is the new president. You know what I love more than anything?
Tell me.
I am the Watcher, and this is a dark moment in history. Oh shit! It's coming for me! What an effective bit. That cracked me up. I do wish in this one moment that this were perhaps a Mark Millar, Steve McNiven comic, and that had been 6 glorious pages with a look back on what's happened so far in beautiful, luscious detail. But that's not a knock against this creative team. I meant that that's a creative team who would do it in a more expanded style, because this bit was so clever. I would have even let it have been Last Planet Standing number 0 and read 22 pages of it if that had been the Amazing Spider-Girl number 0 refresh on everything that's happened, but instead made it the whole universe by mentioning 3 other things. Like, this bit was very effective.
I agree, and is a little bit funny, just like the smash cut to the moon explodes. Just a little bit funny, but I also agree that it would have been a really good opportunity with the Watcher to do a recap issue. Might have helped get people on board a little bit more even.
And speaking of getting people on board, I actually think that this issue is the most effective at blending old cast and new cast. It is too many characters. It is far too many characters still, but it is significantly less far too many characters than were in Last Hero Standing, which was far too many characters. So this is fewer far too many characters, and they each get a chance to have almost a personality, we have to do a lot of inferring for them. You know, there's that old line of dialogue rule where everybody should be able to be told exactly who they are by every line of dialogue. But, you know, sometimes the line of dialogue is no, help, yes. Those can't be things that are exclusive to one person. And not everybody is always going to stylistically say it their catchphrase way. Yip, 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 in danger. You know what I mean? So there is an extent to which I understand that Tom DeFalco is fighting against a preservation of page space that is just absolutely at an extreme at this point in the title. But simultaneously, I maybe would have preferred this 5 issues be like a 120-page special and it be like MC2 the end. I do almost wish this was the jumping off point because it's such a good ending, but I don't know. This is a really good apex moment in the middle.
I agree. Yeah, there are a ton of characters. I think this does a really good job of aping disaster movies and end of the world movies of the time and just giving us that it doesn't always matter who the characters are as long as you can see what they're doing to fight against the end of the world. And, you know, this issue primarily, the Fantastic Four really are the protagonists. They're the ones that are making the big moves and sort of coordinating everything. They're the ones that are experienced with Galactus stuff. And everybody else is just kind of there to do search, rescue, and assistance. And the way it is all laid out, it ends up not being so frustrating to me that we have a ton of characters, all of whom I know and could see doing more in the issue or having a more central role. But in this case, I'm just kind of enjoying the blockbuster moment. And I feel like as I read over it, I don't worry that it's particularly confusing for new readers because it's not asking you to draw any conclusions about these characters based on what little information or dialogue you get from them. It's just saying enjoy these superheroes fighting against the end of the world.
Yeah, it's kind of like that moment in Endgame. Not everybody got a line of dialogue that really defined them. You know, it was sometimes just really cool to see the A-Force moment and just really cool to see Valkyrie on a horse. And like, that can be enough, you know?
Yeah.
And I find Spider-Girl's part in this so interesting because it's really hard to believe she's the apex point of this universe from her involvement in its apex crossover.
And again, that's kind of one of the problems going back to just this idea that this is not really a reset point. It's like, this isn't a reset point, and it's also, this isn't a Spider-Girl world. This world is so clearly bigger than her, but from a sales and production standpoint, it is a Spider-Girl world. It's not bigger than her. She's the one that was popular. She's the one that sold. So she's the one that gets the book. And there's no way when you really start putting her in conversation with the larger universe that she doesn't fade into the background a little bit. In this case, again, like they just make it work primarily by not struggling, by not trying to fit her in places she just absolutely wouldn't go. And as a diehard Spider-Girl person at this moment, having read so much of her, wanting the best for her, knowing that her book has ended and this could be a really good place to do some elevation of Spider-Girl, I might have liked to have seen things go differently, but I would rather they be like this and not see a failed attempt that weighed the whole book down.
Because what I think I love the most about what you're pointing out is the place they found for her was fighting alongside her friends, the Avengers. I've been complaining for a while that I felt like there are so many cool teams that Spider-Girl is sort of a part of, but this is definitely, for me, the story that made it clear that if she's a member of any of these teams, it's for real the Avengers. She really does hang in with American Dream and Stinger and finds herself in these larger than life situations, or later on in this case, smaller than life. But I think that the biggest thing that I needed from this was a little validation on why we spent like 8 issues chasing the Hobgoblin and then Mary Jane like lost her mind, and it just feels like maybe Spider-Girl's canon should have been slightly in a different order. Like this could have come before the Hobgoblin stuff and it wouldn't have been earth-shattering.
Yeah, or the Hobgoblin stuff could have ended sooner in favor of something that tied into this a little more smoothly.
And what we get here is so focused on Reed and Sue that maybe it is better that there isn't a lot of Spider-Girl, because I don't think she could hang in with these brains. Like, she can hang in with Franklin. She is such a smart young hero, and not that necessarily intelligence is dictated by age, but Reed has experience that will give him an advantage advantage in a battle against Galactus, it would be sort of silly in a story about, because like as you pointed out, it's about a universe's survival. This isn't about Spider-Girl surviving the first time Galactus comes. This is a universe's survival. And that means it needs to be from the point of view of the people who are players in the universe in the regard in which the threat is coming.
And I think that's a perfect way to put it, because as we get later into this, Spider-Girl does take a more central and important role along with American Dream and Stinger, and, you know, to a certain extent, J2 as well, which I love just because that feels like a really core group of superhero friends and, you know, people who would collaborate together. It's like a little sub-team off of the Avengers. But at this point, trying to figure out exactly what the threat is and what we're going to do to like make a plan to stop it does really not feel like Spider-Girl's purview. It is something that somebody like Reed Richards has to take care of, and what Spider-Girl needs to do is that search and rescue element. So I'm fine not seeing her, like logistically it makes sense to me, so I'm okay with not seeing her be featured as much, but I loved that they found, admittedly, like kind of a MacGuffin-y, silly plot thread for her and these other characters to pick up that put them right in the middle of the action and gave them real agency in assisting the saving of the universe.
Because the scale we are on right now is that like super crew I mentioned from before clearly make a decision to just like stop Galactus, and there's a weird number of things that all happen at once, and I maybe get lost a little bit in some of the action at times. It's sometimes a little bit better explained in the next issue, where not that the art failed, but that they're trying to do so much in such a small space that ultimately when Galactus does show up, it does feel like maybe the last 15 pages were just delaying and inevitable, and that's a little bit more where I think this could have been a really tight one shot.
Yeah, I get that. And, you know, as it continues, we still deal with a lot of other characters getting a little bit of panel and page time, but maybe not enough. You know, we do eventually see some of the X people, but it's really just Logan and Scott and kind of Jubilee from the back. We're still dealing with a Revengers plot into issue 4 that it just kind of, it's a little bit noisy. And again, it's great to see all these people, and it kind of leads somewhere cute and fun and MC2-ish. But in the meantime, there's a bunch of big plot stuff happening at the Fantastic Four level. We get Silver Surfer into the mix, who's now fighting with Dominus, which feels very dire, but at the same time, like has nothing to do with anything. They're both just like, Dominus is just, I guess, buying time for Galactus, and the Silver Surfer is falling for it. And then we've got this Spider-Girl stuff that, as we continue, gets more and more important and becomes more and more of a featured story. It is a ton to juggle, and it's not always the most successful at letting us understand all of the story beats, but it just consistently remains fun.
Yeah. I think all of that is a really fair estimation of what's going on in these pages. I think the opening of 4 is such a terrific nonstop sort of onslaught of effect. My only complaint is maybe that I wish the balance of issues had been slightly different, such that Silver Surfer showing up in the 4th issue wasn't the cover, because he doesn't show up for like 13 pages or something. So it feels like they could have held that and made it a little bit more of an effective surprise, because he's such a great character. You know, I love seeing Stinger, Spider-Girl, American Dream, and J2, because like you said, they're sort of like the core we grew with the book. You know, that's a real group of friends who do fight together, and the idea of a group of friends just trying to make it against it all, contrasted with that, and I mean this really positively, retro silly Galactus, give it a really childlike wonderment feel. It makes me feel like I'm reading MC2 for the first time again, with some real lush polish to it.
Yeah, I definitely get that. You know, you can imagine the idea that Galactus, for a kid that grew up as a child of the Age of Heroes group, it would be essentially like a myth. And to have that person show up, even though we as readers in this era might kind of want a more sophisticated, evolved, sexy look for somebody as big as Galactus as a villain right now, it really does work because we're following these kids kind of growing into their ability to accept and deal with a threat like this. Regardless of how silly it might look from an aesthetic level, they understand from the ground level how serious it is that they do their job.
Because, you know, what really could be the fate of this publishing universe is in the balance. And with that in mind, it's cool to see the Buzz show up in this, because, you know, like like he was at one point like our favorite, but seeing the Buzz and Saberclaw and Wolverine show up, I'm kind of like, but where the fuck is Rena?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
There were so many great characters that were focused on in Last Hero Standing. Not that so many of them didn't get page time here, but a significant enough volume of them are missing that I am kind of bummed out a little bit because they are cool characters and this does sort of feel like the end maybe.
Yeah, and Saberclaw is really the best example because he sucks. He's a weird design. He's not a good villain.
My
He's not a
literal
good
notes
hero.
are Saberclaw still sucks.
He still sucks. And he's the other child. So there's a child we already definitely prefer who's super cool, who's already shown up for one of these, so we know she can be in the mix and hang. It would have been great.
The thing that maybe isn't great here is how long it takes the Revengers to realize, oh god, he stomped Avengers Mansion. Well, we might die too. Hi guys. We changed our minds. JK. And we want to team up with you. You guys want to do an old school team up? And the Avengers are like, fuck, it's Galactus. Fine. And we'll figure it out later. Fucking fine. And that is just the most Marvel Universe thing.
Yeah, that was the fact that carried on into issue 4. I thought in issue 3 we could have wrapped up the Revengers realizing that there's actually something bigger going on here and that, the universe is where they keep their stuff, so they might want to try and save it. Just taking it into issue 4 where we're getting into questions of page economy. This was the time to cut out some extraneous stuff and maybe have a couple, not the most organic resolutions to storylines so that we could get more page time with characters we really love and want to see.
Because of the cover, I wanted to see Silver Surfer. I'm not some big Norin Rad dude, right? But like, I care. I'm like, hey, how's Shalabal? Oh, sorry about it, dude. At least you're shiny. You know what I mean? Like, but I care enough. And so seeing him get his ass kicked pretty quickly, and ultimately, he's okay, guys, don't worry. But I was surprised because I guess I just didn't see him going down so easy. But that he doesn't. It's a fake out. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Good use.
Yeah.
All right. And now let's talk about it. Man, I don't know that you get as many cool pages that reward fandom, like page 20 of the digital of Last Planet Standing issue 4, that J2 was able to save everybody because his friends believed in him. Come on, man. Come on. That's so good because it's this character. If it was like Iron Man, I'd be like, third grade lesson. Good job. But it's this character, this coming of age character that we literally watched grow up.
And
he's still in high school. He needs this.
He does. And the thing I really love about it is we've never had to do the kind of thing that we constantly do with May, where it's like issues of, can she actually do it? Can she hang? Like, is she a terrible superhero? With J2, we just have these moments where he's like, God, I'm just a fucking kid and I'm scared. And in the same issue, perhaps panels later, somebody will come up and be like, I get that you're scared, but you can do it. You're awesome. And then he does it. And it just, you love to follow him because you're not constantly being told by the writer, like, maybe you shouldn't love following him. Maybe he is a mess. Maybe you're stupid for letting this be your superhero. J2 is always just like, yeah, he's just like you. Like, he's scared of stuff, but he's a hero. And, he pulls it together. I think they were always trying to do like a more complex deep dive into those same things with Mayday, but because they would linger for so many issues, it would really get to a point where you're like, maybe she is bad at this, and if I stop reading the book, she'll quit and we can get somebody else on who can do this.
I get that. I would trade 50 issues of Spider-Girl for a Spider-Girl J2 Stinger American Dream team-up book because you're right, Spider-Girl was occasionally held down by how much freedom she had.
Yeah, again, it's just having all that narrative weight on your shoulders is tough when you already have the weight of stopping all the crime on your shoulders as well. And with limited sources of conflict, we would just often get to a point where it was like, I don't know, maybe she's just really bad at this. But yeah, to have dispersed some of that among other characters, I think really would have been the ideal here. And I think we see it in this moment with J2 because we get that same self-doubt, but it goes away really quickly. So all we have is just he was having a human moment and his friends got him through it and they all saved the day, which is a great story.
And it gives the sense of potential uplifting hope that you need to go into the last battle with. We can't go into issue 5 super hopeless because it was hopeless at the end of 1, hopeless at the end of 2, hopeless at the end of 3. 3. So we need the end of 4 to be that moment of maybe we can, just maybe. And having the victory for J2, having our heroes charge in, having Silver Surfer have survived. My notes say, oh shit, do it, Norrin, because I don't know. I just think it's appropriate to humanize him as much as possible. Just call him by his name. He's, one shiny bald guy to another, right? The cover to number 5 is one of those things that fucks with my mind because I think it is one of the best covers in the whole MC2. But beyond that, in my head now, that's been Galactus's power signature for like 15 years since the first time I saw this cover. And I can never explain why I'm always like, yeah, Galactus's power signature. It's like purple. It's like some teal behind it. And it's really boxy. I love this cover. I think it is just absolutely a beautiful tribute to Galactus.
I agree. I think maybe this should have been the 4 cover.
Yeah.
We should have gotten an MC2 Universe Heroes cover for 5. This is an amazing cover. Like, this is not a critique of this cover. It's just, you're right. Having Silver Surfer on the cover, this would have been a great cover for issue 4. But it is an amazing cover. That's all I gotta say.
And that's actually what my notes say. Really cool, if underwhelming cover, because yeah, this really does feel like the last moment in all of the MC2 possibly, and you're just not celebrating the heroes that made it. This is Silver Surfer's first appearance. Why is he getting a cover in a miniseries that finishes out a universe that was so underserved for so long?
That idea of celebrating this just maybe was not in the forefront of any of the creators' minds, that readers like us would get invested in this whole thing in such a way that we would really want to mark milestones in a way that we are more accustomed to doing with books that we're fans of, that we see the writers loving our fandom of the book, regardless of how complicated that can be at times. We grow accustomed to an idea of celebration, and I imagine, at the time, this didn't seem like something that a ton of people were really celebrating, and maybe just something that you had to finish out the product as best you could.
Well, talk about big finishes. I've never been so obsessed with a really bad idea in my entire life. Reed Richards is like, I have figured out how to stop Galactus. We're going to combine chaos magic with the power cosmic. I am criminally obsessed with this now, which is the only way to like it, is under criminal circumstances. This is a Reed Richards level bad idea. It's so convenient that it's Reed Richards' idea, but this is a Reed Richards level bad idea.
It's a terrible idea. It's also just like a complete and total Hail Mary. It's in the midst of so much chaos, so many characters on screen, but also like they really are invested in Saberclaw and Freebooter as 2 people we need to see a bunch of throughout this series, and that boggles my mind.
Are we supposed to think that they're Chandler and Joey now or something? I don't understand. Are they meant to be buddies, or because it does feel not just like these 2 are a vantage point we're meant to see things through, but rather these 2 together are a crew. Like Hawkeye and Wolverine don't have a whole lot of history at this point, especially. Like there's nothing. Why?
It's very weird, but it's very intentional. And just in the midst of all this, that Reed Richards is trying to put together a mech that another mech can ride and get supercharged with chaos magic, unhinged in the best possible way.
Also unhinged in the best possible way, the promise of a million A-Next stories, an army of mainframe. Ultimately, the fight just sort of becomes madness, which is all it really could ever be for the MC2's big possible knockout, drag down, goodbye fight. The only thing that truly, end of the day, was a no-go for me was, will we save the day came down to eeny meeny. Like, do I throw it at the right thing or the wrong thing? Let's hope it's the right thing. That's not great. Also, I need to comment on some of my favorite dialogue of all time. Arg, never in 1,000 times 1,000 millennia have I ever experienced such a physical sensation. Could it be the phenomena that lesser beings call pain? Though it is barely conceivable, I sense that my great plan has gone awry and that my will has been thwarted. I feel like that's the MC2 destroying Cancellation. Cancellation is like, no, I had you. And the MC2 ultimately just staved off Cancellation a little bit longer.
Yep, Galactus is the universal force of cancellation that was coming for this ragtag universe to say, pack it in, folks. And plucky Spider-Girl and her besties shrunk down, got wrapped up in sheet metal, and and thrown at Galactus's head and saved the day.
Because it's that sort of silly, imaginable, but really unlikely and wild ride that they try to put us on that was so indicative of the end of big stories at the time. Again, I can't help but compare this to Earth X, which it is so very reflective of. Now, this came a number of years later and does its own thing, and it does it in an existing universe, so it's not exactly like they just stuck Earth X, and I'm certainly not trying to accuse anybody of plagiarism. There's just some cool compliments between the two. I am really impressed by the clever usage of death in a very minor way. Definitely escalated the story a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it spoke to what they were doing with all of the other dude masters of the universe, that this was such a big event that we would see those little corners of any universe in the Marvel multiverse that signal a change at the fundamental level. You know, like the other one I was kind of expecting to see was Eternity. It's a neat little cameo and just a reminder that, like, for this particular universe, this whole thing was a huge deal.
Well, you know, you were saying that you think that the really cool star is an access point. I think the star plus the power essential is like a legitimate way to do something.
Yeah.
It's such a big idea that is so epic that the Galactus Surfer, or whatever his name is, the power essential, sort of dwarfs the ending. It's exactly the same ending as Last Hero Standing. Now they're just like, aw, look at the star. It's still there.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know what else they could have done. As I moved into the middle of this issue, there was just no way that it wasn't 6 issues with an incredible closer, or it's 5 that just ends with the problem being solved. And in some ways, I am okay with that, because I think that if it had been 6 issues, I don't know that we would have gotten an incredible closer. I think we might have just gotten more stuff. And given that there's no real thesis statement for what this universe was to the creators or what they want it to be going forward, and if there is one, I don't know that they can follow through on it. Given all that, to me, it's just like the ride ended. You know, you just get off. There's no real fanfare once you hit that final climax.
And that has to be how they operate, because they knew that there was a relaunch coming the next month. How can you really sell us on the severity of this moment when Amazing Spider-Girl number 0 is already solicited?
Yeah, I mean, I can pitch ideas and think of them, but I think that this is such the journey is bigger than the destination series. We got so much of what we wanted out of this in issues 2 through 4, and everything else just kind of came together because you do technically have to end it, and we got this a weird little Galactus surfer star situation that just will always stick in my head as a uniquely interesting part of Universe 982.
All said and done, with warm love and a big heart for it, I'm saying goodbye to Last Planet Standing with an A-, a really genuine A-. It had mistakes, it had stuff I didn't love, but what it really had for me was a goodbye that delivered on the promise that it came in with.
Yeah, A-, B+ maybe for me. One last ride with the MC2 was what it felt like, and that's what we got.
Yet somehow we have even more MC2 to go. Like, we're not really done yet, which is really weird to think about, because it feels like, in some ways to me, this is a really good jumping off point.
No, I mean, it's a perfect jumping off point.
Yeah, I'm not sure why we're really doing more. I'm not here to say I don't want it, but as a jumping off point, I'd probably give this an A-. As a continuing comics point, I can't give it a score. That just doesn't feel reasonable or fair. I think what I would rather do is warmly say, okay, show me what else you got next time. If Amazing Spider-Girl and the second era of MC2, which, woof, it's so short. It's like a third the length. It's tough. But if the second wave of MC2 can deliver on that promise, I'm here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same same way. I think the only thing that is unfortunate in retrospect is knowing that there wasn't really much of a time break for the creative team, a chance to step away and just let the creative mind absorb the fact that it is a decade later since this started. The industry is different. The world in which May now has to exist is different. Might have been a really good way to have a bit more of a reset. The fact that this is really just picking up right where they left off, it's kind of like they deserve the break. I'm not just saying like, you guys need to take a break. I'm like, you guys deserve a break. You did a big thing here. Come back refreshed.
Well, and to make sure we come back refreshed, we're going to leave Amazing Spider-Girl number 0 for our next episode as a brief recap to kick things off for that next wave of MC2. But until then, TK, where can everybody find you online?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at xnate, xgrayx.
You can find both of us all over the other channels of this amazing show, X's for Podcast, over at xsforpodcast.com. Don't forget, you guys can also check us out over on the Hubs Plus network, where we post shows from X's for Podcast, as well as other partner programs like the Billy Club, featuring myself and Tori Sheehan in a discussion of Daredevil, starting with 1964's debut Daredevil story, going story by story through his many adventures. You can also check out my original work in the Young Men in Love anthology, recently released, featuring the likes of Sina Grace, Terry Bloss, Anthony Oliveira, Joe Glass, and more amazing creators. Super excited to be part of it. And until next time, when things get amazing, keep it MC2.
Bye.